It's like hidden in a cabinet. You know, she would find it, and then you would just hear this like blood curdling scream.
I would have abused that. That's fairly good that my sister wasn't very good in that way.
Oh my god, it was like insane.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Here we are.
Hey, everybody.
Who else did Teddy Ruxpin hang out with? Teddy Ruxpin had a caterpillar friend for sure, but there must have been a third.
I really don't remember.
Oh yeah, you guys.
An owl,
for
maybe?
those of you who are just joining us, we've been talking about mainly dolls or toys, mainly who talk, but also these things.
Yeah, Connor, do you know about My Pet Monster?
I very little. There was a movie that I saw one time.
But the movie, but they only made the movie or like the shows or whatever to sell the toys, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but
There was a huge wave of that in the '80s.
But the idea is so great that Connor, you must remember the lore of My Pet Monster. When he has on his orange handcuffs, he's a stuffed animal. A regular ass stuffed animal, adults are like, yeah, your toy, My Pet Monster. But when you take off the orange handcuffs, he becomes real and he can talk and he helps you do like schemes and gets you out of jams and stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember any details of it, but I do remember that.
It's slightly Wolfian, I feel like.
It's a good, yeah, it definitely is. Connor, the shapes and colors of the room behind your head in your shot right now are very pleasing to me.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear it.
I'm very pleased by your background.
Wonderful.
Are you in your little room there, Connor, where we played Shadowrun and did the podcast and stuff?
Yeah, my parlor.
You're in the parlor? I forget that it had blue walls.
Well, each wall is a different color.
Okay,
That's why it's so pleasing.
Yeah.
As a background.
Yeah, I feel like this corner kind of looks like the beginning of a beginner painter's painting. You know?
Yeah.
You
You have
feel the
perspective.
color, but nothing's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be that I'm looking at from this angle, it's like I'm looking at a cube either from the inside or from the outside.
Yeah.
It's the inside.
You know what I mean?
It's satisfying.
Yeah. Are we streaming all this?
Yeah, we are.
It better be. This is gold.
Gold.
Ah.
I've been spending a lot of time with the channel's stats. And
Yeah.
it is incredible how good the first episode of this show does.
Yeah, there's almost like 1,300 views on the first
What?
episode.
How
But
come?
it's and then the next thing has 600 views. It's by far and away the most popular thing. It's the thing that people are consistently watching. We get new clicks on this all the time.
I think the
Is there any
average,
way to
People
find
watch
out?
the longest.
I think the average view time for it is like 5 minutes though, because like I mean that like going back to watch those. I mean that's when I was still trying to like move the camera around to talk to everybody, and it's like it is, and there's like no lighting, even though we're in the Mercury. Everything's just dark.
At the time, we didn't know it was gonna, that it was gonna blow up like it has.
I feel like early on I was perceived as being annoying because I would talk about the lighting before we started. And do you remember this era of Wolfpack?
I never thought that was annoying.
I think there's definitely a time where we were like, where definitely I was like, I'm not willing to put any effort into this. And so then we were like, there's one episode that isn't on YouTube just because we only did it audio.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember thinking, like, there's no way anyone's ever going to watch this, so I don't understand what the point is.
It's for 50 years from now, or 100, but I feel like more probably 50. It's going
That's
to
right.
become of immense historical value.
There is definitely a couple of diehards out there. Yeah, I'm talking to one of them right now. He ordered a tarot card reading from me.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
and sent me a very exciting note about he has a book club. I think he gave me the impression for some reason it's in Canada, but it might be on some group that's about Nagualism. Which, Ryan, do you know about that?
No.
Isn't it? Oh well, it's like a Mexican shamanism kind of witchcraft sort of thing.
He's a brujo.
Huh?
A brujo.
A Canadian group.
Yeah, a brujo kind of thing, but Nagual is what they're called in this particular thing. And anyway, he was saying that he shows his group episodes of this to show him how to do it right or something like that.
Oh no!
It was quite a compliment. This note, he's very excited about what we're doing here.
Well, I mean, do it right in like what, like just barely talking about the book and mostly just going off on a bunch of tangents, or like.
I think that might be what he likes.
Okay, cool. I'm glad somebody likes it.
And he's the person he's put out. I only just now discovered that he's been putting comments on a bunch of our videos that are all like,
Oh.
"There is the production schedule for this channel."
Oh, it's that guy. Okay. Yeah, he was really. I think he discovered us and then expected us to have our shit together, even moderately. So
some idea.
So the point being, we all need to make a public apology to this person.
Yeah. Sorry, John.
Sorry.
Thanks for watching.
What
You
you
know
see is
me.
what you get.
As a Canadian brujo, shouldn't he understand that we're just that's just the way to do it right? He should know.
Well, clearly, he thinks that he thinks that we're doing it so much right that he's trying to teach other groups how to be more right like us. Apparently.
Cool.
Like, that's what I'm
Starting a
saying,
movement.
is that we're the blueprint. He should be answering to us and we should be like, why the fuck do you have a regular schedule for your book club?
Well, I think he wants to answer to us.
What we do is, when you're asking someone for advice on something hard, and they're like, "Just don't try so hard," and you're like, "Oh, don't try so hard."
Except our answer is just don't try.
I think that whenever we do often go on tangents that don't appear to be like immediately linked to the content of the chapter we're discussing, but I do feel that in every one of those departures, what we are doing is reading like a current event or another media in the way that Wolfe has taught us to read.
Mm-hmm. Right. Totally.
Every single time.
Every single time.
And also in a technical sense, all subject matter is relevant to these books.
It's true.
Yeah.
They are. They contain multitudes, to be sure.
In a strict technical sense.
But honestly, I mean, this show isn't even 100% about Wolfe. If you watch it, it's more about us and what we talk about.
That's right. Those
Seriously.
tangents are character development.
It's not about
Yeah.
Wolf, it's about the pack. That's the point. It's about the pack.
That's right.
Okay, I think maybe we should stop self-aggrandizing so much.
Not aggrandizing.
We have one viewer. Don't get too excited.
It's just
Yeah,
a
exactly.
Apologize.
Wait, but there's a point that was raised, which is that people are flocking to this first episode because it's the first episode, and you're like,
Yeah.
let's start with the first episode, and it's like barely watchable, and you can only watch 5 minutes, and then almost nobody goes. Like
Yeah.
what was it, like 5 or 10%, 20% of the people.
It's sort of like Shadow of the Torturer.
We have 20%.
How
They read the first 5 pages and then they
Like-
put it down.
It's just impenetrable. You're like, all right, I'm good.
How can we divert attention to later episodes that are more watchable?
Maybe someday somebody will get really, really froggy and edit down some episodes to just the watchable parts.
I don't think we have to change anything. I think we're doing great. Keep
I said
moving
maybe
forward.
somebody would
I
do
think
that.
that's the biggest hurdle that stands in our way is moving forward.
What if there is a playlist of our best X? Now, someone might have to watch.
We should have a separate clip channel. We should just have a clip channel where we have
something like that.
like 5 to 15-minute clips of just like best ofs. But that's going to
That would
require
be fun to watch.
It would be fun to watch. I think it's going to require somebody to go through a whole lot of hours and hours of video and edit it, and I'm certainly not going to do that.
Maybe like cut each down to like 1 hour. I feel like when people like stop to listen to something, they want something longer than 15 minutes. They want like half an hour to an hour, right? At least.
That's actually true. No one's like, ooh, I want to like pick up my phone every 15 minutes and take a new clip.
That's
I
not
bet
like
you could-
clip, though. That's more of like just hardcore like editing down.
Yeah. That we have
I feel
some
like
folks. Some folks will just put the show on to like listen to people they know talking.
You're talking about one
Yeah.
person, and his name is Tim.
No, actually, there's a Pat McQuaid told me and Connor that sometimes he would just like put on Wolfpack like while he's cooking and stuff. But yeah, so he feels like
There's two.
he's hanging out with us.
And there's a bunch of blips where somebody just watches half an hour of it.
Yeah,
That
And
actually
I figure those must be the people who are cooking something.
yeah.
That's
I know.
what
Totally.
Tim watches them. I think Tim's been going through like. I think he'll eventually probably watch them all. Sometimes I'll see him and he'll be like, "I'm a little behind."
Wow. Imagine. Has he read the books?
No,
No,
Oh, wow.
That's the weirdest part.
but I
He's in
think, but he
English.
puts them on like when he's cleaning or whatever.
Yeah.
I could
I mean,
see
that's
watching it without having read the books as being entertaining because the material in the books is like really diverse and you could never predict what Wolfe was going to throw in next if you hadn't read these stories. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a Borges version of Wolfe to watch this and not read
Right.
the books.
Yeah. Watching. That's a very that's like postmodern Borgesian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's a lot like that book, House of Leaves. Where you're trying to figure out what you never get to see the movie. You get to read people's thoughts on a script and then people's thoughts on other people's thoughts and stuff like that.
I could not make it through that book.
It was a slog. I
Yeah.
really had to push to get through the end, which is so unlike me.
Now, I mean,
If I don't like a book, I put it away.
that guy's books are so gimmicky that it's really hard to like. I don't know.
It's all about the design.
Yeah, and I mean, as somebody who likes designing books, I can appreciate that, but it's still like, I don't know. Like he's got another book where it's like two stories that start on either side of the book, and you have to flip it over to read it, and then they converge in the middle. I don't know, man. Just write a story. It's fine. You don't have to go that hard.
Yeah, I mean, it depends whether or not they do it well, right? Like, do they pull it off or not?
I think he basically does it. Like it's not like a gimmick just for gimmick's sake. It usually has something to do with the story, but I think that the gimmick tends to get in the way of, yeah. You
Well,
know.
in the House of Leaves, I find that everybody's stopped reading that book at the same place. And it's
Yeah.
like the gimmick takes over, the chapter where there's like footnotes in a column through the middle of the chapter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Everybody stops at that point. Nobody reads beyond that.
And I mean, that's sort of what happens with Infinite Jest too, where it's like, I mean, plenty of people get through Infinite Jest. I haven't though, and it's I have a certain love for that kind of like footnotey, like metatextual thing. I think that is fun, but also it makes it really hard to get through a 900-page book.
Yeah.
Isn't Infinite Jest also about a piece of media that you never like see, but is there a video that kills you if you watch it or something in Infinite Jest?
Yeah, basically.
It's like an interesting idea in it, but honestly, it has like seems to have so little to do with what you're actually reading in Infinite Jest.
Right.
Just
Mostly it's about like pot
tennis
smoking
and
tennis
drugs.
players. Yeah. I
It's
didn't get
about
very
how
far.
horrified he is by his own pot smoke.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I don't think I got very far. Like maybe 100 pages.
I mean, it's like I like David Foster Wallace, but yeah, it's not. It's
Same.
not
I
easy.
mean, it's all about writing style. Like
Yeah,
that's
it is.
fine.
I much prefer his short stories just because they're like you get moments of that kind of insanity that he's clearly capable of, but it's actually digestible.
He's really funny too. Like he's
Yeah.
hilarious. So there's that one short story where they have this convention where all of the people who ever appeared in a McDonald's TV commercial gather together in this town in the Midwest for like a convention. Like, and he just kind of like follows all the different characters as they're like, landing on the plane, like flying into town, and what they're going through, what their lives have been like since they last appeared in a McDonald's commercial. It's amazing.
I remember that story. There's a lot of really good ones, and they're like some of them are a little bit gimmicky, but that's like gimmicks work great in a short story.
Yeah.
Really,
Stories.
when you're dealing with a novel, it's way tougher.
I've never read any of Gene's short stories. I've read those novella, and that's as short as I've read it.
You never read Gene Wolfe short story?
No.
I don't think I have
Shut
either.
the fork up. Really?
Shut the fork
That
up.
surprises me so hard.
Yeah. I've just spent so much time on this long stuff. It's very, very long.
My shorts. I should read more short stories because that's what I end up writing most of the time anyway. But like, if I'm gonna, I usually just gravitate toward novels when I'm digging into an author's work or just generally. So I've read the Sun Cycle books that we've addressed so far. I haven't read any of Short Sun, and I've read The Sorcerer's House, which was like a weird 2010 Gene Wolfe book that at first I thought was really dumb, but the more I think about it, the more I think maybe it's still good.
Yeah, even the bad ones have something in there. Hey, can I tell you guys something cool I read about Gene Wolfe's name and The Long Sun?
Yeah.
I was reading the section in the companion book about the naming convention of Long Sun, and it said boys' names use either animals or parts of an animal, like Wolf or Gene.
Oh,
I thought that was really cool.
that's fun.
Genes are also in plants.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Oh.
Andre Derusi.
Maybe Gene Wolfe was in touch with his feminine side.
So true. So true.
Gene is
well,
both a boy and girl name in our world.
Well, Gene is the overlord, so he doesn't. He has the name that is all the things.
yeah.
Exactly.
And genes are such a huge part of the book in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They talk about it in chapter 7 or wherever we
We
are.
talk about it in chapter 7.
I have it underlined on the page that my bookmark is on, which says
Hey.
it's our genes, not our names, that make us whatever we are.
Which is
Yeah,
hilarious
me too.
because Gene is his name.
I bet Gene wrote that and then he laughed for a solid 10 minutes.
Yeah. He went and got his wife. Hey, look what I did right here. Look what I did right here.
Take that, you nerds!
It's a very interesting and odd thing for him to say in this book, isn't it?
Mhm.
Is that?
Yeah.
Is this something Gene is saying about the Trivaganti, or is he just like making fun of us?
He's making fun of himself because he's also like clearly put a lot of time into choosing characters' names to reflect who they actually are.
But he's also
When he meets Auk, he's like, Aukhad clearly has changed his name because his face doesn't look like a bird, it looks like a bear.
And Crane
I
doesn't
wanted
look
to
like
say
a
something
crane.
about that, because when I was reading that part, I was thinking about what you were saying about Aka, how it's not his real name. And we're putting so much emphasis on like Silk, Tussa, and Chenille, etc. And wait, weren't you saying that you think Auk is like the called his real son or something, or you were just saying he don't care? So, like, maybe he's saying, like, don't put too much stock into this thing. Because it turns out Silk really... He's, like, sort of Chenille's brother, if you think about family in just, like, a contextual or, like, abstract way. But they're not literally...
Ox definitely Chenille's brother.
What?
Ox definitely Chenille's brother.
Yes, and his name has nothing to do with her name's... But he's also... Crane's name isn't Crane, really. And so I feel like he's sort of... Everything that Crane says in this conversation, I think he's saying something totally... He's, like, telling Silk a bunch of other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
None of us realize to this day.
And we never will.
We never will.
Is Crane... So he's described multiple times when we first meet him as a fussy little man. Like, that's like the formula that's constantly used to refer to Crane. So in this reading, I was seeing Woody Allen, especially after when he does the little "my mother hoped I'd be tall." That to me sounds like a Woody Allen joke from a stand-up, where, you know, one of those jokes that's like, you know, don't knock masturbation. At least it's sex with somebody I love, you know, or one of these, like, my wife is smoking after sex, but she'll only do it out of the side of the house, you know, like stuff like those kind of self-effacing jokes. And the fussy little thing, I was trying to see him. I was trying to see Crane, and that's the closest I was getting.
Yeah.
Is
Do we
that
get more physical description of him?
We hear that he's short and he's not like a crane. He's like described as being kind of round, I think.
The reason I don't picture him as a Woody Allen type self-effacing character is that I feel like he's a little bit more self-assured. At least that's how I read him.
But he's also acting, right? He's being
he has like a doctorly confidence.
Because he's a spy.
Yeah.
He gets, in my brain, he gets jumbled in with Dr. Talos so hard. I feel like they're like the same guy.
Yeah.
Like, I just...
That's interesting.
They're like one face.
They're crafting, both of them are crafting moments. Dr. Talos.
And also,
Crane is
this moment where he says the thing about it's our genes, not our names, and he's talking about how he looks like his father and stuff, also, like, does a callback for me to when Silk is talking to... I'm sorry, when Severian is talking to Master Ulton, and he's talking about, like, genes and jizz and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like one, like your identity is in like a little Juratum fluid.
Yeah. Well, this is another instance of Wolfe illustrating the limits of scientific or medical understanding that we've talked about frequently, you know, on this program. But Crane attributes everything that we are to our genes, which Silk, you know, brushes off, you know, instantly. And I think Wolfe would also probably disagree that we all, like, basically essentially boil down to our genes.
I think he might also be kind of insinuating that there's not a lot of difference between someone who thinks that genes control a lot of what you are and someone who thinks the will of the gods control what you are, or like determine your outcome. I think he's saying, like, you guys are not as dissimilar. You're not even really opposed. You're just pointing at a different thing. Or different names for the same
scientific Calvinism.
Yeah. Calvinism is interesting. It's gotten popular again in our era.
Yeah.
Baptist. I wish I knew more about that.
Baptists love Calvin.
Huh.
Is it like regional? Are there certain regions of the U.S. where young people are adopting Calvinism more than others?
Wait, young people are adopting Calvinism?
Like in the last, like, 10, 15 years, like, there's been a strange, like, I mean, I don't know if strange is the right word, a surprising to me kind of apparently surgence of popularity in Calvinism with young people.
In what context?
Like young people, I'm guessing people who are raised religious but then are kind of unsatisfied with like the particulars, and then gravitate towards these intellectual writers who are young, who are like writing books about how to be a young Protestant in today's world.
Oh.
I don't know if there's more of a name, or if it's called like the New Calvinism or something. I don't know, but it was something I started reading about. I heard about a couple years ago for the first time and looked into a little bit. But it's a very fatalistic kind of Christianity. I mean, it is probably like the example of the most fatalistic kind of Christianity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so it's New Calvinism, also known as the Young Restless and Reformed movement.
Yeah, which sounds kind of like a Good Charlotte album or something.
Or a soap opera. Yeah, and it's a movement within conservative evangelicalism that embraces the fundamentals of 16th century Calvinism while seeking to engage those historical doctrines with present day culture. Weird.
Interesting. I mean, a lot more interesting than just being a vanilla evangelical.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, if you're going back to the beginnings of Calvinism, yeah, that's very strange to me. But I mean, I guess you can't expect everybody who grows up in the church to end up, like becoming some anarchist wizard or something. So.
It's fun to
they gotta have something. They gotta have something for the jobbers. So.
Well, geez. Is there a code in the stuff about his father, or is that just we're just actually talking about his father?
I'm sorry?
So Jordan said that like everything that Crane tells him is like a veiled message about something else, right?
I don't think he's talking about his parents because his name isn't actually Crane. Anyway, maybe the other details are true, but I don't know what he would be referring to. But there's no reason to think that he's talking about anything real.
Do you remember if you get his Trivaganti name at all?
I think he does.
Because those have significance. I know. There's like some Trivaganti person is named something that implies that the women allow him to behave like a woman, and that's how he has power, or something like that. I forget. I have to go look it up.
Because there's the other Trivaganti guy too. You mean them?
Yeah, one of Blood's drivers is Willett is a Trivaganti agent.
Yeah.
Willett?
Yeah, Willett.
Yeah.
What kind of animal is that?
Not Wait, is that what name is that? Is that his fake name?
That's his Veronese name. Is Willett.
His Veronese name is Willett.
I think it's a weasel, but I don't have my book on me, and I'm not sure.
It's a bird of the snipe family.
A snake.
Oh, like the crane. The shape's similar.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Shorebirds.
Wading bird of marshes and wet meadows.
I wonder if there are other birds, marsh birds, hiding in this book.
I would kind of think that anybody that has any name having to do with the marsh bird is part of Crane's network somehow. Like
Are hyacinths?
the bodily.
Do hyacinths grow in a marsh?
Was that?
Do hyacinths are associated with what kind of landscape or terrain are hyacinths associated with?
I don't know.
I don't think they're wet, but I'm not.
Probably not. If they're just like a garden, if you can do them in a garden, probably not. Why would, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another little detail that we get in this conversation is the detail of Silk's eyes, which are blue, which Crane notes and seems pretty impressed by. And Crane mentions that he's seen 2 or 3, two other people who have had blue eyes in his whole life. There must be some significance to that.
Oh, wait, Hyacinth is also a stone.
A stone.
It's a companion. It says it's a precious gem. In ancient times, probably the blue sapphire. In modern use, a reddish-orange variety of zircon. Also applied to varieties of garnet and topaz of similar color.
So she's a robot.
She's a robot?
Yeah.
Oh.
You know,
Could be.
there are similarities between. I was like noting how she was described physically, because not a lot of people get. No, they do, but like he uses words like extraordinarily and like incredibly, like. So it's kind of similar to Jolenta's description.
I was just about to say that.
Whoa. This is crazy. And then, okay, so her insane behavior in the last chapter, is that because robots taking rust are like real rattled, or is she is that a robot pretending to be on rust?
Does she know? Like, is it possible to not know you're a robot?
But she's also possessed, right? Or I guess not. What happens when the robots she's programmed or imprinted with Kypris, right?
Yeah.
She could be a person she could be a cyborg.
Yeah, like how Rose ends up being 5 different people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or how Jolenta is like a modified human.
Yeah, augmented.
I feel like tying her back to Jolenta is really helpful for me. I feel like these books are the same book in this way, where you like characters are overlaid on other characters, which is why I think of Talos as, or like I think of Crane and Talos as like the same person.
And Jolenta and Talos are kind of together.
Yeah.
And then, or at least, Hyacinth, everyone who is at Orchids is right? Not everyone, no. Right, everyone's spying for Crane, basically. Or they don't know they are. Not everyone knows they are.
Right. Hyacinth like right in the middle of it. Wow.
Dang.
That's crazy. So who had any suspicion that Hyacinth was a robot?
Nobody.
I hadn't thought about it.
Not until I just saw this thing.
This is a Wolfpack exclusive.
But it's confusing. But it's also Hyacinth is also a plant. So I think like just saying she's a robot is oversimplifying. I think
she could
something,
be.
Well, or partial or something like, or some kind of like mixture or something.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, in the world, a person that is completely bio and a robot are both as easily accessed by the deities of mainframe in analogous ways.
Yeah, there's like barely a difference.
Yeah.
Except for, I guess, lifespan.
Yeah.
But like both of them are just like viable potential vehicles for the personalities of the gods.
Wild.
Also, I guess we might have talked about this already, but it's talking about this Greek myth, which you guys probably already know about. But it says Hyacinthus, a beautiful Spartan prince, was beloved by the poet Thamyris. Then Apollo fell in love with Hyacinthus and destroyed his rival Thamyris. But the west wind also fell for Hyacinthus, and becoming insanely jealous of Apollo, caused an Apollo-thrown discus to veer in flight, so that it struck the prince and killed him. From his blood sprang the hyacinth flower. So that's like a blood hyacinth thing.
Right.
Whoa.
Whoa.
And also, is Blood not Blood's real name? Wasn't there intimations at some point in a chapter or two ago where Silk was like, that's a very rare name, might not be his?
Well, it's constantly remarked that Blood is a very rare name. I feel like that comes up regularly. People are like, "Oh, that's a weird name."
Yeah. But I think Blood's his real name because of the Rose connection.
Don't they say later that it was due to like the nature of his birth?
Disgraceful.
I wasn't it like
through the whole thing. Shameful.
Particularly bloody?
Oh, maybe.
I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like I remember that little detail.
Does it say anything in the companion about Blood? About his name?
Ooh, nerds.
Yeah.
Oh, I could go for some nerds right now.
You get those names.
I've been hitting the Halloween candy in all September.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, so, okay, Crane says, you want to see my father? Well, you're looking at him because I look just like him. And genes control you. And then later, like 2 pages later, when they're talking about the blue eyes, and Silk has said, like, I've never seen my father. I have no idea what he looked like. Then Crane says, oh, it's a shame you don't know. I'd like to have a look at him. But Crane has also just explained that when you look at the son, you see the father.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I also think so. Everybody, there's that legend that the Chaldee left a son someplace, and that would be the rightful Chaldee. And the Triviganti are well aware of this, and I think part of Crane's mission is to manipulate that, to like cause instability in the Prosimian government by producing this rightful Chaldee. And so I think that Crane thinks that's the significance to Crane. I think, you know, like, oh, I found it. This is Tuss's real heir.
Yeah, wouldn't mind getting a look at your dad.
Right.
Is he also saying something about them being clones? Maybe they're. He looks exactly like his dad. And he's sort of saying, and when you're saying like, oh, I wish I could get a good look at your dad, you're not necessarily saying like your dad is cool. You're just pointing. I feel like it's like pointing to thinking about, well, like, who could his dad be or something. You know what I mean? It's more like not necessarily saying something necessarily, but telling you that there's something going on with Silk's dad.
I think it definitely signals duplicity
time,
it definitely signals duplicity on Crane's part, that he's contradicted himself like within the span of like one exchange. You know, I think it's definitely signaling like Crane has something going on besides what he's pretending or like, you know, delivering on the surface.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking for that fight. Oh, wait, where are we in here? Oh, we're still talking.
About this section where they're having the conversation?
Yeah, I
their mothers and eyes.
In terms of the blue eyes, if no one in this society has blue eyes, or a very small amount of people, then it must point to like a lineage, right? Like it must point to a line of descendants. There must be some reason why people have only small.
I was thinking maybe they just are from the Cold One stash. Like there maybe was some connection there. Like the people who have been living in the world genetically there aren't any like blue-eyed people there.
Are blue eyes a recessive trait?
Probably. I think brown is more dominant.
Yeah, so could is it possible that like blue eyes were represented like an average when the world populated, but then as people reproduced, recessive traits would become rarer, right?
Also, my understanding is that people with light, like green or blue eyes, it's like to the degree that you can track characteristics, like physical characteristics to ancestral environments or whatever. Like having blue or green eyes means you come from like a people who live in the woods, basically. Like it's like you're used to being in the shade. Like it's a which is why people who have lighter colored eyes are more sensitive to the sun. Yeah, I got green eyes. I got green, and I'm like very sensitive to the sun. I have to wear sunglasses. Like, but that's my understanding, is that it's because you would have been, yeah, like either in a place where it wasn't as sunny in general, or you were like living in the forest or whatever, like under a canopy.
In the caves, underground.
Yeah, in a drawer full of
Hyperborea. But yeah, in the hollow earth.
Well, I mean, it's also thought of as kind of an ideal, right, by people who subscribe to that kind of bullshit, that like a blonde, blue-eyed person is like the most desirable. Is that like an Aryan thing?
Yeah, is it? It's a Barbie thing. You would
Yeah.
know.
Right. That and that, if Silk is the descendant of Paz/Typhon, did Typhon look like that, or did he like modify himself to look like that, and is he trying to preserve that through his lineage, which is Silk in this instance? This is what I thought.
So I do know like what the actual significance of that line is, because they talk about it later, and I remember.
Oh.
But the conversation was really interesting.
What's the significance?
And it's just that blue eyes are actually really common, and that's how Silk knew that Crane wasn't from Byron.
Right, the blue eyes are really common in Byron, but not other places.
Oh, okay.
Dang. Silk is so interesting because he is oblivious to so much that goes on, except for very, very important details that people aren't really that no one else is paying attention to.
Yeah.
Is this him with like is he possessed now though? Like, or does he get more perceptive now that he's seen holy hues? Because there's like a little god in his brain or something.
Like in the Matrix when Keanu gets like new skills uploaded.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Or not.
Does Silk kind of belongs in the tradition of autistic detectives, yeah? Like,
Totally.
Yeah, Sherlock and Saga
Monk.
Marine, Landskrim Malmo. And Young Sheldon and all of those.
Yeah.
Young Sheldon.
Yeah. Monk.
Monk, yes, Monk.
Is Young Sheldon a detective show?
In my head it is.
Now.
Yeah. I don't plan to watch it and ruin the beautiful vision in my head.
Did we mention Columbo and Murder, She Wrote? Murder, She Wrote's like that, right?
Is she autistic?
She's
just-
Oh, autistic, no. I was thinking sorry. I thought we were talking about, I knew what we were talking about, but then I thought we were talking about, like, unassuming or like underestimated people who get the info, who get the deets because of their like their natural charm and stuff.
Did you ever read the mysterious incident of the dog in the nighttime?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's about a kid who's pretty autistic who like has to figure out like the mystery of like who killed a dog. I guess I haven't read it for a long time, but it's actually a pretty good little book.
That's a cool mystery for a kid show.
Yeah, it's
age appropriate.
Yeah.
You gotta start with dogs before you can move up to people.
It's okay for dogs to die, but we can't kill people.
Only for training purposes.
Yeah.
Training?
Immediately after the Blue Eyes conversation is when Silk puts like deduces that since they're fixing him up, he's not going to be killed, and then he says, Silk savored the thought they were not planning to kill him, and so there might be a chance to save the Mantian.
Mm-hmm.
Like a very, very explicit indication of Silk's selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason to be hopeful, the reason to be hopeful about the fact that he's not about to die is that he might be able to finish this mission he's on.
I kind of had a thought that might be relevant to this. And I don't know if we've mentioned this before, or if my question has already been answered, but do we have confirmation that he's really supposed to save the Mantian? Or does he just think, or is that just what he wants to do? And he's like...
he's on a mission from God.
Did the outsider tell him that?
I mean...
I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I think that he is on a mission from God to save the Mantian because he so fully believes that that's the case. But I do think that it's his own idea that he projected onto what is actually going on.
It puts him on
I
the
don't
right
think that the Mantian's in actual danger. I think that I've convinced myself that Blood is just going to let things continue on as per normal, and that Silk doesn't have to do any of this.
Well, that's what Remora says.
Oh, does Remora say that later on?
When Remora comes in, that's first scene when Remora comes in, he's kind of like laughing that Silk thinks that Blood's gonna like rip the mansion down or something. He's like, well, I mean, come on, like he rips it down, it'll just build you a better building. He's not gonna.
It does seem by the end of this chapter that like very, very plausible that Blood has quietly bought the Mantian so that his mom, who he's like afraid to go see, will be safe. But he's not capable of going to confront her himself, and so he's just doing all this kind of sketchily.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Silk is constantly saying, I like this guy. Despite it, I can tell that he's not as bad as that other guy.
But he also takes it as an opportunity to, to basically extort money out of Silk, Yeah. But it might explain why he was so eager to leap on the opportunity. Like if Blood really had plans to like turn this into the next house on Sun Street or whatever, he would probably go through with it, right? That would probably net him more money ultimately than what he's doing with Silk right now.
Right.
But if he has no intention to do that in the first place, and then he's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, you go out and find me some money and an amount, Yeah. And then we got a deal.
And really what it is it's a penalty for breaking into his house and forcing him to have to do something. Because he can't just let the guy leave. The guy broke into his house. There's like destruction around. People have witnessed this. He can't just be like, all right, see you later. He has to do something.
He told a bird too. He got Mucor all riled up before bedtime. You know how long it took to get her back calmed down.
This is what Remora said in that section.
Because Remora the one who's always like, hey,
hey.
Jeff Goldblum.
funny time reading this. But this is what he says. Troubled, did you say, Patera? This mansion? It has been, well, sold, as you say. But the sale is only a legality, eh? You follow me? A mere contrivance or stratagem of Quetzal's, actually. The new owners, the name. Anyway, whatever. And then he says, this Musk has paid your taxes. That's how he got it. You follow me? For the taxes and some trifling amount over. These buildings are in need of refurbishing, eh? As you pointed out yourself, Patera. Well, let him do it. Why not? Let him bear the expense, not the burst, eh? Eventually, he'll donate everything to us again. Give it all back to the chapter, eh? A meritorious act. And then Chenille starts to say that, starts to cut in, she doesn't think that that's the case. And then Remora says, we have ways, my dear, as you'll see. Dear old Quetzal has, most particularly. So basically, Remora is saying that they have a scheme. Although I don't, it's hard to know whether that's true or not before this whole theophany thing happens. But anyway, that's Remora and Quetzal's take, I guess, is yeah, no, he's not gonna rip down the mansion and get rid of it.
Just as a little footnote, when we get to Remora, we should all take a turn reading Remora.
I think everyone should work on their Jeff Goldblum impression. So by the time we get there, we can have a chorus of Goldblums.
It has been sold, as you say.
He's so distinctive. I don't know how you develop that speech pattern.
They sold the mansion.
Okay.
Gotta save the mansion.
It must be based on someone.
Well, there's a couple of other people who have speaking patterns like that too, right?
Yeah, this book is full of them, and it's wonderful. It really helps you keep those Pateras apart, distinct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous, but it's really easy to read. With you know the joke, and occasionally the ahs are really funny individually, but it's not like it doesn't get old because your eye can just.
Yeah.
In a movie or in an audio thing, it might get old, but the fact that it's a book, it takes no extra time.
And it's good because this book communicates so much of its story through dialogue. Like word for word, if you scan through the pages, I don't know what percentage, but a high percentage of it is just straight up dialogue. And so I feel like Wolfe really intentionally pays attention to that in order so you can understand and get a flavor for the characters through their speech mannerisms.
Yeah. Oh, and Oreb. I can't wait till we get Oreb in our lives.
Yeah.
I feel like Oreb's the pinnacle of that, of a gimmicky speech pattern taken so far beyond where anyone else would take it.
Oh, you know who's worse is because Oreb is cool, but who sucks is Tick. I fucking cannot understand what Tick is saying.
Yeah.
Fuck Tick.
Yeah, Tick is. I feel like I picked up 10% of the Tick lines when I first read this book, and I would sit there and puzzle over them, coming up with dry. Surely these lexicons now that are available translate all of his lines, huh?
Yeah, there's a whole dictionary of
Tick
Tick
speak.
words.
Yeah, this
Anyway.
whole chapter is just dialogue, back and forth, explaining motivations and things.
Yeah.
Oh, also this.
Oh, I like dialogue.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I feel like this chapter doesn't drag at all. even though it's just them talking about going from kind of subject to subject. Oh, here's a line I underlined I thought was weird, though. Not once in a month did Silk drink anything stronger than water. Didn't he mention coffee when he was leaving? And, like, imagining his like, post saving the Mantian feast that he was going to have? Wasn't coffee in there?
Oh, but he was very guilty about that feast, everything about it.
Yeah, and he also, like, keeps reusing grounds. Like, his big urge was that he got rid of the old ground.
Right. But that makes me think he is drinking coffee probably more regularly than once a month. And even if it's old grounds, that's stronger than water.
It's brown water after the second go through. But I see your point.
Maybe just meant strong in terms of alcoholic content, maybe.
If so, it's very imprecise language.
Yeah.
Gene sucks. I'm not reading these fucking...
Yeah, fuck this inconsistent bullshit.
I guess everybody's a robot.
Everybody's a robot.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. What a crazy thing to find out today. I wasn't expecting that. I feel like my whole world is in a different place now. That Hyacinth is a robot.
Cyborg, technically, probably, most likely.
I'm having flashbacks to Boomer in Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, how it's like such a betrayal. You're like, oh my god.
Well, there's all these layers of that where you're like, oh no, this nice guy's lover is a robot, and then later on, you're like, oh no, that nice guy turned out he's a robot too, but he killed his lover because she was a robot. And then you're like, oh no, but they built another one of her so they can be together. Like, you're just having these crazy "my love is a robot" emotions that you can have nowhere else.
She was in Nexium, the cult.
Cool.
Oh?
Yeah, Boomer. That's the one I feel like was one of the two girls from the show that's in the cult where the guy has Thelxipia and Sphinx behind his head sometimes when he talks.
Ah, yeah.
Is Kara Grace in the cult? That's who I would want in my cult.
No, it's the other girl is like a mechanic.
Yeah. Cassie.
I
Yes.
was thinking of the mechanic from Firefly, so I can't imagine.
Oh, that's a better mechanic lady.
Burn.
That's right. Sorry, Cassie.
That's who I'm taking my broken spaceship to.
Anyway, back to the world.
Look at this guy lounging over here.
Yeah, I've been having tummy troubles. I'm not going to try to do anything other than be as comfortable as possible.
What else happens in this chapter? A lot of Musk. We get a whole lot of creepy henchman Musk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whole lot of Musk going on.
He's kind of a Tarantino-y character.
Tell me about that.
Or I imagine him as like a. Sorry to interject, but on that note, before you go, he reminds me of a villain in like a who's the like a Wes Anderson movie, But anyway, yeah. But you were saying you think more Tarantino.
Oh, he seems kind of Kill Bill to me. Like they do at some point say something like that gives him a Japanese flavor for a second.
Jordan got something to say.
I just got a flash of Crispin Glover in Charlie's Angels.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, totally.
Oh, that, but like kind of creepy, like a little more effeminate. I guess is that we're supposed to draw that from Musk. That
I think it's like maybe dialed back, or there's like something different. It's not exactly that. I think maybe like Tarantino or Wes Anderson is more on the mark.
no,
Or he should be more comical.
I like Crispin
like-
Glover in this role. And now I'm thinking of like a kind of a gayer Crispin Glover, and I'm like, this needs to happen.
I kind of see him, for some reason, I imagine him sort of like Rami Malek.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
creepy. He has a creepy face.
He's not a guy you want behind your head, like with his knuckles poised to do something to your nerves.
That was that a credit card commercial he was in right after he won the Oscar? That was like everyone was sharing on Twitter, but because he was just like, it seemed like a serial killer monologue or something. I don't remember that or saw that.
It's funny to think of Elliot being the voiceover for a credit card commercial. There's no way that I would get that. Like, I could only think of Elliot talking about how fucked up this credit card is.
That's so true. I didn't think
It'll
about that.
fuck up your entire life.
From E.T.?
No, Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
Yeah, he's Rami Malek's the main character in Mr. Robot. No, Elliot.
I knew that. I just thought it would be helpful to get it said for future viewers of the show, archivists, historians, and stuff.
That's really thoughtful.
Watch Mr. Robot.
When Wolfpack is remembered, but Mr. Robot
came out in the aughts or the 10.
Somebody's gonna want to do the wiki that like links every single other media referenced.
Well, it all goes through St. Elmo's Fire. That links everything.
It's a movie.
The 80s movie?
It's a Brat Pack movie.
Oh, not St. Elmo's Fire. What's the show? I'm talking St. Elsewhere.
St. Elsewhere, yeah.
Oh, where the kid imagined it all. The retarded
Everything
kid?
links through St. Elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now that we're on television, our lives have been created by St. Elsewhere as well.
Do you think there's any chance that Gene Wolfe was a Cheers viewer?
I think that it would be
Everyone was.
Gene Wolfe was not.
The only reason I ask is because of Dr. Crane, could be like a reference to.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
guess this is written in a post Frasier world.
Well, a post Cheers world, right?
But yeah, post Cheers, not.
He would be a fussy man for sure. That would be a fussy.
He's not little though.
Yeah,
Right. He's not little. Yeah, he's a tall man.
Maybe
That's
maybe
the
he's
magic of
David.
books. You
Maybe
hear
he's
the voice.
Niall.
Yeah, it could be Niles.
Could be Niles.
Oh my fucking god, I love this so much. It has to be true. It has to at least be the inspiration. It has
to be true.
It has to be. There's no way he didn't know about Frasier. There's no way.
Yeah, and the physical resemblance is not necessary because I feel like as an author, like you make the physical form that's symbolic for what you're trying to do, and you put any voice you want in it, in your head. Like, I love that voice of that guy on Cheers. He's the perfect fussy spy doctor.
Yeah, he doesn't need to have the same body type. Like, that doesn't need to literally be Frasier Crane for him to, like, want to use a character like that.
Well,
Reminds me of the time that,
Bob has a very different body type than Frasier Crane, but
That's
they
true.
both have the exact same personality.
It reminds me of the Dungeons and Dragons game that the only time Madison has ever played Dungeons and Dragons, her character was Frasier Crane, and it was incredible. He was very stupid but very rich. He made a lot of mistakes. It was really entertaining. So, pro tip: if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, just be a sitcom character.
Pro tip. Be
Is there
Frasier.
anybody in the chats right now?
I think Joseph said something a long time ago. Oh wait, fish heads?
Ooh.
Fish heads. I don't know when this was said. I wasn't paying attention.
Fish head sounds very specific.
There's a heart after it too.
What?
Because we were talking about how we liked Orb.
We were talking about Orb.
Orb, yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant there was a chat member named Fish Heads.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
No. That was what Joseph said was fish heads.
Fish head.
Yeah.
He also said both Crane and Talos surgically alter Jolenta and Hyacinth, respectively.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like Wolfe has gods himself, like these archetypes that have to recur from that book in this one, because that's how he like organizes the world. These.
And, I know that I'm really just being myself right now, but just last night I was thinking about how this is the key to unlocking everything, and how these patterns of people that we're finding totally are in this book as well. And I just am really upset with anybody who thinks that someone shouldn't read that book.
In the context of Gene Wolfe, or in just everything?
Well, I used it to unlock my entire life, but certainly if we're unlocking any Gene Wolfe story, this makes everything make so much more sense. I was just reading about how the Lake Avernus was near the cave of the Sibyl of the Coos in our real life. What? Yeah,
I mean,
in Italy, that's the geography of things. And it's like, God, it's all right here. He's just telling this story over again.
yeah.
John O'Neill's in the chat and says, I made it my favorite collective of unreliable narrators.
There we go.
That is a very perceptive way to put it.
Nice.
Anyways, read The White Goddess.
I started it. I need to go back. It is, I can understand, I feel like, I'm not excusing them, but I understand why someone might have like a strong, like, I must discredit this book reaction, because it's difficult and somebody might not want to try hard enough to get through it. I myself haven't tried to get hard enough to get through it yet, because it's surprising.
Once you let it kick in, once you get through his the bit where he's just like, the key to understanding this poem is that they arbitrarily put all the lines in different places. So I've just taken them all and put them in the order that I think works best. Realize that's the central point of his argument is that I just rearranged this poem and now the entire world has more meaning. Once you get through that, it's so amazing.
Yeah. It is like, it does immediately come off as like a manic episode that someone is having.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. But like, once you step through the threshold into the manic episode, his manic episode makes your entire life better.
Wow.
You get to tap in. Now you can see how every story is retelling the same story over and over again. We're all just, that's what God is. We're all just expressions of the story. So, yeah, it's great.
Well, I mean, that depends if you think that existence does have a narrative, though, you know?
Well, it only can if you let it. If you don't let it, then it won't, and that's your fault.
I would also say
there
that
might be something else besides a narrative.
I think you impose a narrative on it when you explain that existence doesn't have a narrative. You impose another narrative that is saying that once upon a time there was a universe that had no order and it was never set in any kind of motion. There was nothing more intelligent than a person. Like, that's a narrative.
Yeah, well, I just think that the opposite of a narrative isn't necessarily disorder or no order. I just don't know what the opposite of a narrative might be. But
reality, like in the moment when things are confusing and you're having trouble living your life, that's the true chaos of situation. But then that decomposes into a narrative in your memory. Your consciousness edits that down to something that makes sense, and that's how reality has a narrative. Is you remember it into existence so that you can function in the now.
Yeah.
I think.
And that thing that you just said is a narrative about how reality works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I feel like there's no way of getting outside of narrative. You can't like step outside and say this is narrative and this isn't, because when you start talking, you start telling a narrative.
Well, there's no way to do it while talking.
Yeah. Okay.
You can know like what you're saying is a
thing-
narrative while still understanding that there is a reality above your story.
Right, but you get there through a narrative. You get to that reality. A narrative is the only thing that takes you to that reality.
Existentially, we are just pieces of a narrative, and therefore it is hard for us to be able to see outside of that fishbowl.
It's like Flatland or whatever. Like,
Exactly.
Right. I think it's a
you
real
can only,
flatland
when
situation.
you're existing in until you like experience until and unless you experience are taken out of your dimensional experience, anything will just be mediated through that dimensional experience.
Right.
It's like when an astronaut goes outside and looks at Earth, and then all of a sudden they can understand a new level of understanding about our place in the universe. To unless they
Love with their crewmates.
But outside itself is not like a thing that exists independent of narratives. The idea that there's an inside and an outside is the narrative.
What is your point? What are like?
I guess I find that it's just like I'm confronted suddenly with a shocking situation in which I feel like people are constantly saying like, yeah, narrative is this thing, and then there's this thing outside of it, and there just is. There is a thing. Of course there is, but all of it is different narratives.
But it's like it's like how you can't, when you're living in 3D.
But you're describing a story. You're describing a book that tells a story about how reality works.
Okay, like if you change. Okay, here is how. I don't know. I don't really know what you're getting at, but okay.
I feel like everyone's going to an outside of narrative place, and I'm like, I can't get
Right,
there.
and
I can't
you're
find the door
essentially
there.
you're trying to argue there is no outside of narrative.
I'm saying it's a narrative that says there's an outside of narrative. You don't get an outside of narrative without a narrative that tells the story of a universe in which there's narratives here and then other stuff's here.
Well, when you're in this version of existence,
Right.
it is all narrative. It is all narrative to describe a version of existence that's outside of this existence.
It's the description that makes it narrative, though. It's not the fact of it. It's if I don't know. I mean, it's hard to talk about objective existence, but like
right,
we're talking about subjective idealism right now.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
We
Wait,
talked about this in Nodding Off.
Just think of it this way, y'all. Like another animal doesn't have narrative. It's just a human construct that we're trying to apply a lot of significance to, and which has a lot of significance. It's very important for human beings to have narrative, and historically that's always been true. But it's not like necessarily an existence-defining phenomenon that exists outside of human beings. Like, we don't really know that. We're not sure, but I wouldn't say that it is personally. But I don't know.
It's not objectively true, but that doesn't take anything away from its subjective truth. Like my existence depends on that I am part of a narrative, and that's what existence is. So therefore, it's true. But the moment of the Big Bang doesn't need that to be true, and it can perceive all things as the non-narrative sculpture of possibility that they are. And all I can do to get to that point is as many mushrooms as possible.
Same conversation we were having about, like, what was it? Like truth and the different
facts.
Yeah, this is the classical truth and facts.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact is that narrative is projected onto reality, and the truth is that narrative is my whole world.
Well, I guess it's settled then.
I mean, that's just where my work has led me.
For me to, like, in order for me, I guess, to start believing in outside of the narrative requires me to accept a narrative about outside of the narrative.
But
but you're a human being. You have to do that.
Creature, and like any understanding you have of something has to be through. Like narrative is your philosophical Saint Elsewhere. Everything has to filter through that. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way that things can be. It's just how things have to be in order for you to understand them. which doesn't make it not valid. It just makes it personal.
So once we start talking about things outside of what we can understand, what makes one of those things like more true than another one of those things? If they're all outside of what we can understand.
They're not true.
They're facts?
In as much as they can affect you, they would have to be factual, not necessarily truthy. Truthiness is a subjective thing.
All right, I've been clubbed into submission at this point.
Yay! Philosophy brute. Philosophy brute.
Philosophy brute. And for more discussions like this, without Ryan disagreeing, watch Nodding Off.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm looking for clarification.
I just think that, like, have you seen that Carl Sagan clip where he talks about Flatland and he talks about like fourth and fifth dimensions or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like if you have like a 3-dimensional, like, you know, he has like a clear plexiglass cube, and he holds it up where like that thing is making a shadow onto the piece of paper, and it's like that cube. The shadow of that cube on a piece of paper looks like, you know, a drawing of a 3-dimensional cube. And that's like the projection of the 3-dimensional object into 2 dimensions or whatever. Yeah. And so like, but
it's
so then you go
metaphor, is what you're saying?
But so then you go 1 dimension higher than that. And because we live in 3 dimensions, our like physical and psychological understanding of what that is limited to our ability to process it in our 3-dimensional framework. But that doesn't mean that it isn't, it's kind of like another layer of reality or whatever. Like, we are limited in our ability to understand it, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
And the reason why I just kind of like enjoy the conversation is that I think that lies are very easy to embed into narrative. And I think it's good to be aware of that. And that's why I personally, in my own philosophy, I always just want to like try to push beyond narrative is like something that's inherently positive in existence, because I think it's very slippery. And I think, you know, I've talked about this before, but if we are to evolve, you know, we may want to reconsider our relationship to it, because it's very easy to get caught up in a narrative, and that can be damaging to individuals and groups.
But you always get out of a narrative with a narrative.
Exactly. I was going to say earlier about how, like, what the power of the narrative is that once you understand that you're living a narrative, that your life is a story you're telling yourself, or your reality, you can tell yourself a different story. You're not changing the details of the story, you're changing the story you're telling yourself about those details. Yeah. Or like,
you can Rashomon that shit.
Like, but so like, you know, when people talk about like samadhi or whatever, like samadhi based schools or whatever, samadhi is a state that you achieve, and that's not the end goal. Like, you have to figure out how to. But when you're achieving samadhi, you are projecting outside of 3-dimensional reality. Like, that's what that is, right? So you still have to, but that's not the end goal. You still have to ultimately, because we live in the 3D world or the narrative world or whatever, when you come back into your body from that experience, then you are narrativizing it, and you are connecting it back into like this world or whatever. And you are understanding it through narrative, but that doesn't mean that it itself is narrative. Like, that's what I'm trying to push on the thing that you keep saying, Ryan. It's like, yes, inherently, because we are beings who process through narrative, we're putting narratives on things. But that doesn't mean that everything is a narrative.
We're talking about Calvinism again.
Wow! Yay!
Just like the kids. Just like the young people. That's what they're going to subscribe for. The Calvinism.
And the thing about Calvinism, predestination, and narrative is like, if you can take a step beyond your normal view of narrative and into this meta narrative, you don't have to necessarily throw narrative out of bed, but you have a more of an ability to manipulate the narrative and be empowered by it. And I mean, and this is what Aleister Crowley and all of the early 20th century occultists is saying. Like, I recognize that my life is a narrative, and I'm recognizing how much control I have over that narrative. I'm going to force myself to write with my left hand until I can believe that that girl loves me. And then she will. You know, but it's about recognizing, oh, the whole thing is me telling a story to myself, so I'm just going to try to tell myself a better story.
Right. I guess that's what I think is always happens when you go outside of the narrative, is that you haven't like left narrative behind. You've got a different narrative. And
I mean, I have definitely had experiences in my life in which I have left narrative behind. But it's when you come back from those experiences that you end up having to narrativize it in order to assimilate it back into your daily experience.
Well,
I'd say I have personally had many experiences of being outside of narrative, and like in that experience, that is true.
And we all experience moments of being outside of narrative all the time. Like, there are these moments in mundane life that you're not. I mean, there have been lots of different ways of thinking about it, but like when you're just being and sort of being without thinking about being, there's not really a story being told about that. It's when you start reflecting on your own being, and not even just in like, what am I kind of thing, but like, what am I doing, or what did I do? That's when it becomes narrativized. And there, you know, like if you're just like zoning out while you're driving, or you know, like taking a nap or something, there's not necessarily a narrative to that. And it's just when you think about it after the fact and engage with it in a conscious way that it becomes narrativized.
That's a very good point. A thing can't be narrativized until you've stepped out of the actual narrative that's happening. You can only do it from the benefit of
because the narrative is only ever a description or an interpretation of things that happen.
But
and
the meaningful things.
Isn't there always an underlying narrative which decides what routes you can go on in analyzing a situation or categorizing a situation or like considering a situation? Isn't there like...
Sure. I mean, that's meta narrative. That's what meta narrative is. But that doesn't mean that, like, there are points in your daily existence when you're just like flossing your teeth or something, when that's like, when you think about your day, you're not going to include that in the story necessarily, unless something happens. You know, unless you like bleed, or unless there's like a notable feature of that moment. But there are lots of moments in a human lifetime that don't have notable features, and they just happen. And that doesn't mean that it's not necessarily a part of a bigger story, but it's not a narrative. It doesn't become narrative until you describe it. We're always in the midst of interpreting and describing the things that are happening around us, and that's not always necessarily a fully conscious endeavor that we approach, but it is something that requires, like, I mean, this is why it's like a feature of humanity, is that we look at our own existences and we tell these stories about what's happening. And a rabbit or a mouse or something is not necessarily going to be doing that. They just are.
You're just telling me a story about rabbits now.
I know I'm telling you a story. That's because I'm consciously engaging with this thing that we're talking about.
Right. But the thing that you're telling me about rabbits is not a self-evident fact. It's a story about how rabbits work.
Sure. Yes, but that's all we can have is stories about things. But I'm telling you that...
Yes.
if we weren't thinking about that, if we were just like, whatever, there's a mouse, like we are now telling a story about what it is like to be a mouse. This is like Nagel shit. I mean, he talked about bats, but
all of what we're talking about were concerns of modernist fiction writers and poets around the turn of the century, like James Joyce and Gertrude Stein, who, were really trying to deconstruct narrative, over 100 years ago.
yeah.
Ulysses, obviously, for those of you who've read it or listeners who are familiar with it, is just like what's going on inside of the brain of a man during one day, and it's like a huge 700-page book, and it branches into other things, other styles too. But that's like the basic gist of it. And Gertrude Stein was tried very hard to capture the moment in her writings by just deconstructing everything and just sort of crafting language, words together, in an effort to remove that bit of narrative out of the reading, thinking brain, to claw it out of there, and that's when you read language poetry or anything like that. I mean, John Ashbery, like that's like, these writers are trying to deprogram narrative out
And
of,
at the
out
same,
of you.
and that's at the same time we're starting to see like Hegel and Heidegger. I mean, Hegel's later, like 19th century, but Heidegger, especially in the early 20th century, was really starting to look at being as this multifaceted thing where you have like Dasein, which is like being among others, and Mitsein, which is like being with it's been a long time since I've gone into Heidegger, so I'm going to fuck all of this up. But there's this understanding of being as this thing that happens in different contexts, and that there is a moment where sometimes you're just like there's a thingness to what you're doing. So he talks about like a hammer isn't anything until it's used to hit a nail or to break something, or like a chair, it like becomes a thing when it becomes a problem in some ways, or like there's a problematization of thingness that's happening. And I think that's similarly what happens with human being, is that there's a thingness to our base existence that becomes a different thing when it becomes apparent to itself in one way or another. So you're maybe just flossing your teeth until you start bleeding, and then there's a story that's happening. But before that, it's maybe not anything.
Oh, John O'Neill has some stuff in here. Wouldn't the narrative of a sorcerer like Crowley be equivalent to a lifelong ritual or spell?
Sure. I mean, that's what rituals and spells are, narratives.
Or like Robert Anton Wilson, right? And was all about that, like taking on and off beliefs, like.
You got that from Crowley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's part of my thing about it's all narratives, but like it's not even all. You're not living one narrative. You're living multiple narratives at once. Some of which, like to go to the teeth flossing thing, in one of the stories that you're telling, this moment doesn't matter, so it's not there. But then in another story that doesn't start for another 20 years from now, that becomes a pivotal moment, and now it's very much part of the narrative. But like,
yeah, I agree with you 100%. I definitely don't think that there's like a narrative at all times that then gets replaced. I agree with you that narratives are like, crossing and uncrossing and tangling and being the same, and then branching and etc.
And then there's a supra-narrative position that can view all those narratives and see the pattern that they make that is outside of any one of those narratives, and in fact includes all of those narratives, but is beyond those narratives.
So what's the difference between actually being beyond the narratives and seeing them, and telling yourself a story about what it's like to to see more than you can see.
That's an experiential difference. That's an experiential difference. Like telling yourself a story about another state of being and being in another state of being are two different things. They're not the same thing.
And they're both constantly happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because the narrative is there doesn't mean the narrative is existence.
So you know the difference when it's happening to you. You know the difference.
No,
I mean,
not necessarily.
That's my experience. My experience of when, if I'm thinking of specific times in which I have notably been in another state outside of like narrative-based existence. Like, I mean, it's. I mean, particularly when you come back from that experience, you know that, and that's why it's so difficult to discuss those experiences, is because they're not narrativized, and then you're constant, and that's why I actually like try as much as possible not to talk about those experiences when I have them, because I feel like that actually takes away from the experience and it starts to like flatten it into a narrative. I try really hard not to in later flatten it into a narrative, because it isn't that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a characteristic of intense psychedelic experiences where it's that I don't know. I mean, like going back to the book for once, when Silk is enlightened, he has this moment of intensely complex understanding that he is not able to process in that moment. He only has this. He sort of gets this supra narrative perspective of everything, and he knows that he had that experience, but he doesn't know the full content of that experience when he's not in it. And so he knows something profound happened. He knows that he has been communicated something,
and in order to make sense of it, he has to make it into a narrative.
Yeah,
right. And that's only something that happens, that gets drawn out. Like he can tell himself his story. I mean, he's saving the Mantian. Is this thing that he's like, all right, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And
I think this was maybe the content of this enlightenment that I experienced, but there's no possible way that he could say that like the outsider actually like said, hey, here's what you got to do. You got to save the Mantian, and you're going to do all of this crazy shit to do it, and go for it. That's not what happens.
I think that this is, to me, also like the worst part about being an artist, in that the original thought that I conceive of in my brain is this perfect, wonderful thing, and then as it becomes narrativized, as I make it into the work of art that it will be, there's at least a point where it is diminished from being brought down into reality and being put through that narrative, where before that happened, it was this pure idea that was perfect because it wasn't real.
And this is like the lightning flash going down the tree of life.
Yes, exactly.
Right, it gets degraded a little bit and that's I mean, I think you see a lot of artists really trying to. I wrote a paper about this in college, so it's the first thing I think about. But Mondrian, like a lot of his ideas behind like breaking down painting into just geometry and primary color was his attempt at achieving a universal language, and like coming into contact with the absolute nature of God, and it never quite worked. Like he never got where he wanted to be with that. And that's.
But I mean, would you argue that Mondrian or artists like that, whether we're talking about painters or writers or whatever, do you think they were trying to strip narrative out of their work?
I think, I think in some ways Mondrian was. I mean, I think the way that we're talking about narrative is.
I mean, idea, I guess.
Yeah,
Like,
like this.
you know what
I
I
think
mean?
this is
Like,
one particular way of thinking about. I mean, especially since this is in the context of talking about a novel, really thinking about it that way. But I mean, there are other ways of understanding that same process that is not necessarily like. I think visual art, and particularly like painting or static visual art, there's, I guess there is narrative to it, but it's also about capturing something like static. It's about or it's about having this static object that represents a whole lot of other stuff as well. So it's not necessarily this idea of like we're stripping narrative out of this. It's more like, I guess it's more representational, even when it's something fully abstract like Mondrian's work. There's a representationalism to what's happening that is, I think it's tied into this idea of narrative. I think like Gadamer would talk about it as interpretation. I think if you're looking at it hermeneutically, it's less about like here's a story that we tell, and it's more about here's a process of understanding that's happening. And so, and I think those are ultimately kind of the same thing.
Right.
And it, like Gadamer gets used a lot in literary criticism for that reason. But I don't necessarily think that everybody's engaging with that idea with sort of the same like framework, even if it is a similar thing.
it's just always how I've interpreted. Like, if anyone's ever gone to the museum or something and like looked at like minimalist art, which, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, think like Mondrian, like to the next step, like here's my minimalist piece of art. Like, it's a black box, like there it is. And like, I guess from my time working as a museum security guard, like I had a lot of time to like look at art and think about it or not think about it. And I came to view it personally. I'm not an art historian, but I just came to view it as a statement that they didn't want to say anything. And that was like, to me, was like taking away the statement. Whereas if you walk down the hall to the Renaissance wing, like everything is like full of characters and colors and like stories, and that progresses up until like whatever, like anyone representing any object, countrysides, houses, is all stuff. I consider that all narrative in a way. Like a painting of a house is a narrative. Like it has content in it, right?
I think particularly with minimalism, there's still like this. It becomes a lot more meta narrative focused. I think particularly in those moments of modernist and postmodernist art, the narrative is less about the thing that is being represented and more about the artist's relationship with the academy.
Right.
It's like it becomes this, like the black box or whatever is this figurative representation of the artist's struggle with meaning making in an art world that adheres to particular standards and is financed in particular ways. And like that's when it becomes this very like meta narrative thing. And before modernism, you're seeing this more like direct representation of like non-meta narrative that's happening.
Right.
Like personally, for me, stories, movies, music, visual art, this kind of thing, I feel like I can appreciate with minimalist kind of sculpture or whatever, sometimes like aesthetics that like, oh, you did a good job with this object. But I also just in my gut, I feel like works of art that create a new world to me draw me towards, I get drawn into them, whereas works that seem content simply to comment on the world as it really is don't draw me in. Does that make sense?
Can you provide an example of both?
Well, like I guess so. Your hypothetical like black box or something.
Yeah.
there's no new world for me to go into with that. My brain starts thinking, okay, what is the comment that's being made? How does this relate to to what I'm doing, standing in a whatever mausoleum looking at an object, like I have to go into what I think the real world I share with this person is to try to like connect with it. Whereas like when we go down the hall to your Renaissance paintings, I see a field with like nymphs dancing in certain configurations, and it's like a new world. It's like a world is created, and it might have relation to our world, but it's like it's also a fantasy. Doesn't
that come down to your personal preference, and B, isn't, at least for me, like the whole point of reading books like this, which are like ostensibly creating a new world or whatever, they're still about our world. Like it's still describing our world, it's describing it through a different avenue, and then it's just about whether your personal like way of thinking is better suited by one or the other.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like the stuff I like is objectively better. I'm just saying that this theme is for me ties into my relationship to art, and like I like to read this book and talk about how it relates to the real world because I'm inside of it, and whereas like I wouldn't want to read a book that just explained here's my idea about how reality works, like in a nonfiction or like a pamphlet way.
Well, I think it's appropriate that we started this episode talking about like House of Leaves and Teddy Ruxpin.
It all goes back to Ruxpin.
Infinite Jest. We were talking about David Foster Wallace, and like these are, I think, looking at something like Infinite Jest as opposed to House of Leaves. You're looking at. I feel like both of them create different worlds. But one of them, I feel like, is sort of hamstrung by its gimmickness. Like it becomes its meta narrative focus is something that's less exciting or meaningful, and more just something that gets put on top of a story to kind of like try to make something that's maybe not as interesting more interesting, or just try to like add additional layers of complexity to something without necessarily needing to. Whereas Infinite Jest is this thing where there is a whole new world that's created, and it's sort of this extensively dissected and footnoted thing. But that's an inherent aspect. I mean, it makes it a very difficult book to read, and a reason why a lot of people don't get into it. But it is this kind of, that feels a lot more like the Infinite Jest meta-narrative experience feels more valuable to me than the House of Leaves meta-narrative experience, where sometimes I think particularly seeing that in the later 20th century sort of Gen Xer like literary movements, where this meta-narrative focus becomes a gimmick. It's not an actual thing that they're really working through in the same way that like Gertrude Stein was, or earlier like modernist writers. It becomes this thing where it's like, well, isn't this fun? Isn't it just fun to do this? And I've definitely fallen into that trap too. Like I wrote all of my like undergrad fiction was so fucking obnoxious because of its insistence on like one of the main characters being me, and then me having conversations with myself, and then like having that story that everybody's reading being critiqued in the workshop. Like those are all just like, it's fun. Like it's a fun thing. It's like, cool, I read David Foster Wallace, but it's not actually, it doesn't make it a good story. So I think like what you're saying is that the black box you can appreciate on a certain level, but maybe that's a gimmick. Maybe that doesn't actually make it good art.
I like Wolfe. I like this. To me is like is like the ideal situation in which there's a fantasy world that I don't have to like necessarily bring all the baggage of this world in order to understand, but like you can just we pull so much out from under the surface because it's like, I don't know, he's mixing intellectual ideas with sort of visceral imagery and these archetypes and patterns and stuff that aren't necessarily like best expressed in nonfiction, but like seeing them in motion, seeing like a fantasy world with its own internal logic that is consistent. And
what makes Wolfe's craftsmanship of narrative so impressive, and I think allows us and all these other Wolfe readers to enjoy, is that there's always an element of it that's beyond your understanding. And I think that's key to what makes Wolfe great, is that there's always an element outside of your reach, and you always want to reach for it. And it makes you keep going, you know, you keep thinking about it, and it's not self-contained.
That means that you can have these nonfiction companion volumes that get stuff wrong.
Yeah, totally. Probably gets a lot wrong.
Miss the mark, and I think that's beautiful, in a way that like, and that really does make Wolves like. I mean, I don't know. I definitely enjoy this more than Infinite Jest. so I think letting someone else do the footnoting and getting a bunch of it wrong is really a really nice way of achieving some of those similar effects.
Yeah.
Is it even wrong? I mean, it might not be what Wolfe intended, but on some level, if it makes sense, it's there, right?
Yeah, I really got to get that Borsky.
Yeah, I mean, well, you end up having this. You end up having this side narrative of like, okay, what is Derussi's experience of this book?
And it's totally valid and pleasurable and helpful to experience. But I think for me personally, I'm just of the opinion that so much of it is not right. You know, and this is obviously like a big recurring topic in Wolfe criticism, but like, you know, in my opinion, I do not believe that it can be decoded. I think Wolfe, to my reading, specifically set it up so that you would always have to keep reaching for it. You know that.
Well,
that
I
you
think
never
that would be.
unwrap it.
I think that's a fair distinction to make between Driussi and like Aramini, though, because I don't feel like Driussi like. There's still a lot that he's not talking about in that book. It's not like he's not saying. I don't think he's really saying like, here, I found all the keys to unlocking this shit. I think he's more saying like, these are things that I find helpful to think about or something. But like,
he's very careful to say like, this is just what I came up with. It's not exhaustive. But
it's like he's leaving a breadcrumb trail from his own journey through this work.
I mean, and even then, I feel like he like leaves a lot of stuff out. Well, I don't know. I don't really think of him as the same as like an Aramini, is all I'm saying.
Well, I think one of the big things to consider, you know, we talk about how this reading Wolfe, there's always, you know, it's structured in such a way that there's always something more that we're not getting. And I think I'm sure part of that is Wolfe having some really specific ideas about what's going on and not putting them in explicitly.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is, it seems like Wolfe is working from a place, a very like unconscious place with a lot of this work. I mean, it's clearly like he spent so much time writing this stuff. He clearly thought out a lot of it. But I think that a lot of it's also coming from a place that is way less conscious about what's going on.
Might we also consider that such a thing, such a setup, is pointing directly to the fact that there are things outside of narrative?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm into that.
It's fun.
It's funny because it seems one thing that happened early in our discussions, I feel like, is that Connor insisted several times that this was like the third something of the I mean, this is like Old Testament, New Testament, the Third Testament, yeah?
Yeah.
But the thing that we're describing right now with like this spectrum in which you put like Aramini as like a supreme formalist, and then Derussi's kind of in the middle, and then we're on the other end being like, nothing, you'll never know, you'll never figure it out. Like, that's such a biblical kind of setup. I feel like
we're certainly the Gnostic part of Wolfe criticism.
Yeah,
Best part.
The best part.
This material has like generated such a huge spectrum of response from people that are reading really carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up with totally fundamental, like, I don't know, like different descriptions, not only of the text, but of the universe which the text describes and the universe in which the text exists.
Yeah.
That's literary criticism, though. You know, like if you go into like a college class and go into the library and pick out all your books for your college paper, you pick out 20 different books on whatever fucking author or painter, you know, Shakespeare or whatever. That's what's been happening in literary criticism for years, and that's just because different people are looking at the object and they're bringing themselves to it, right? That's what criticism is, really. It's your take on a thing.
You could say the same thing about like the legal system, you know? I mean, it's like
on everything. Yeah.
It's just like, okay, or you're going to take the Constitution and you're going to use it to justify the thing you want to do. Like,
yeah,
whatever that thing is.
Post-fact world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Post-fact?
Fact.
Oh,
Post-fact.
Post-fact.
Sanic the Shazbot's here and says, I remember hearing that Wolfe said that a lot of people had interpretations that were so clever and beautiful that he wished he intended them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets down to another favorite thing I like to think about with art is does a single person ever generate from within themselves any art at all? Surely art comes through us and not from us.
Oh, yeah. I feel like this is okay. So now we've reached the fracture point where usually Tim is the one that's arguing against everyone else.
What am I supposed to say here?
We have these internal fracture points that just get hit on again and again and again.
I don't know. Well, so something that I've been thinking about too. I know that Connor was at this lecture, maybe Kirby was, but like years ago at Normals, a philosopher gave a talk there about Lovecraft, like the sort of metaphysics of Lovecraft. His name is Graham Harmon. Yeah. How many of us were there?
I don't think I was there for that. I remember that series, though. That was a good series.
Yeah. So Graham Harmon, I know that Connor had beef with him, which was very funny. But this is actually before I was friends with Connor, so I just remember it happening. But he's this proponent of what he calls object-oriented metaphysics or ontology, which I think is a lot of what we are talking about here. Is this idea? I don't know. There are a lot of ideas that he has that I think end up kind of being present in what we're talking about, with sort of like interconnectedness of all things and manifestations of supreme being and that kind of thing. But specifically when he's talking about Lovecraft, he's looking at the sort of Lovecraftian gods as these beings that exist outside of narrative. Like, that's the whole point of them, and that's why they're so fucking terrifying, is that they're actually like, you can't even really tell a story about them. You can only tell a story about people losing their minds because they're interacting with these things that are beyond our reality, that are beyond the narrative that we tell ourselves. And so when I think if obviously they're in narrative, like Lovecraft is writing stories sort of that take these things into account. So obviously there's that layer of it. But when I think that's maybe something that we're circling around, is this idea that there is something that exists outside of narrative. We maybe don't know what it is because it's not something that we're really.
This is a really
That's not
interesting
something
example to bring up because with Lovecraft, I love this idea. I'd never, I guess, heard it expressed that way before. I really do like it, but also like vital to getting to Lovecraft's perspective is the narrative of like a materialist universe. Like Lovecraft can't get to those monsters without first having come to believe this story about the space is infinite. There's nothing out there that resembles humanity. If we did meet something, it would be incomprehensible to us. Like Lovecraft can't even have those monsters without that specific narrative getting him to that point.
Sure, but I think also part of it is that those monsters don't even necessarily exist within like space time. like we're only like when you see the tentacle of Nyarlathotep or whatever, it's not a you're not actually seeing the appendage of a physical being as we understand it. Like you're seeing sort of like from the Flatland example, like you're seeing this thing that's passing through our dimension. You're seeing like a slice. You're seeing a three-dimensional slice of a thing.
I'm not talking about what happens inside the story. I'm talking about like outside of the story. Like Lovecraft comes to he gets these visions of these kinds of beings and monsters that he couldn't have gotten like 500 years ago without like materialist science explanations of how things are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of his work is coming from that place of like the sheer terror of understanding how small we are.
If the universe is as the scientists and Newton describe it, then it is most likely that there are things out there that are bigger than us that won't care, that will squash us like the way we walk over an ant. Like that whole that's a
critical engagement with that meta narrative, I guess.
Yeah, that story about how the universe works.
Right, but I think in the Harmon interpretation, Harmon's not really looking at it as this like literary criticism thing. He's looking at it as an illustration of this idea of object-oriented ontology.
Are we even allowed to talk about Lovecraft? Isn't he thoroughly canceled?
No, we're allowed to.
I think you're allowed to talk about Lovecraft as long as you recognize the problematic parts of it.
I think there's an HBO show that addresses him.
I don't think you're not allowed to talk about people who are canceled.
It depends.
You just maybe don't like
think you aren't
idolize
allowed.
them. You just don't idolize.
I had this conversation at work where I was an older coworker of mine and a coworker of mine who's younger than me, and they're both kind of film buffs in a way, and myself, and we were talking about Woody Allen. And so the older coworker said, "Oh, I know he's so terrible, but I just really loved his movies." And the younger coworker said, "Oh my God, I mean, I absolutely loved Woody Allen, but as soon as I learned about all this, I cannot talk about him anymore. He's done. He's canceled. Like, that's it. Like, stop talking about Woody Allen." Like, very emphatically. And in me, like, in between, I was like, well, we can talk about it. We just have to contextualize it.
Yeah, but then the way you talk about it.
Well, I think especially with Woody Allen, like all of the things that are problematic about Woody Allen are absolutely present in his movies.
It's an exploration of those problems. It's his
So like you can watch, like you basically watch Woody Allen having a discussion with himself about these things that are a problem with him. I don't think he's necessarily like you see a lot of his neuroses, even the ones that he's not necessarily trying to present. I think you see a lot. In his work, but that's like these issues are, I think, they're implicit in any conversation of his work, or they should be.
I just genuinely don't know. Like,
I think also a conversation like that, like what you're describing, Tim, I think, or any of these things, I think inherently, like. It depends on your relationship to like trauma too. I mean, like if you have like experienced sexual abuse or something, and someone wants to have a conversation with you about an artist who
Right.
is like an abuser, I can understand not wanting to have a conversation at all about that person at all. Like I can understand that,
But
you know.
should you, as an ally to that person, engage in conversations about that artist with other people? That's
think-
where
I think
What?
I mean I think I think it's important to talk about Donald Trump. And I don't think that like talking about Donald Trump is endorsing Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense to be sensitive to people's needs in real time in conversation.
Like,
I think like if
that's like
someone's saying like I don't want to talk about that person,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
then
Well,
I think you just don't talk about that person. But I think in other contexts, it doesn't mean you can't talk about them, but it does mean like the way in which you talk about them needs to be qualified.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. So let's, instead of saying let's talking about artists like that, what about patronizing artists like that? Like, should we rent Woody Allen movies?
I mean, I think like I think ultimately all these things are really personal problems that have to be solved. I mean, you know, like there was this whole email thing going around with a bunch of people I know, mostly like poets, where they were going to do this. They're doing this like Walt Whitman reading, and I had never really read Walt Whitman. I'm not a Whitman person, and I'd never read him, so I was like, oh, I'll go to that. And then the person who was organizing it, who is like a queer poet, sent out another email before the first one happened and said like, I just want to like introduce some things into the critical space, you know, and sent out a few articles about Whitman, about how like he was this pretty fucked racist guy. And I haven't like really ever thought, I don't come from like a poetry background in any way. I'm not like a poetry person at all. And so I didn't know, A, I'd never really read Whitman, and B, I didn't know anything really about it. So then I read all these articles written by various people about him as a person, and then I was like, you know, I don't really want to go to that reading. Like, I don't want to, like, but I understand if you're a person who, I understand that you could have different people could have different reactions if you're a person who came up reading his work, or he was like a really important figure to you in your youth. I could understand one person saying like, well, I still really want to engage with this work, but it's important that if and when I do, that all of this stuff, contextual information, is present and accounted for, and that's included in the reading of the work. And then I could also understand a person who's like, fuck him forever, I won't read his work. And I think like, I think the idea that there's any correct stance is problematic. And I think like, it's just a really personal...
Because we talk about this stuff on the internet with each other and with people we don't know so much, that like the really important factor that you're talking about, Jen, of like sensing someone's uncomfortableness and be like, you know, not being rude or pushy or a bully, like that stuff just doesn't happen on the internet. So we got into this totally other space with this kind of stuff where it's sort of like all become online, like about rule, like a general one size fits all rule.
Right.
And it's really interesting to me that there's it's like, okay, when we're talking about like Woody Allen, just since this is what the example we've been using, like it totally makes sense, like what you're talking about with someone who's been abused, doesn't want to be a part of a discussion or have to hear a discussion about this abuser and their merits. So when we don't have that conversation around them, are we doing it out of courtesy or because Woody Allen's abusiveness is more true than any other aspect of him?
Well, I think the important part of contextualization, like when you're critically engaging with something, is that you're not only looking at the context of the author, or like the creator and their like historical moment or whatever. You're also bringing in your own context. So like the critics context is as important to that critical engagement as anything else. So somebody who has survived abuse, that's a really intense context for them to be in when they're experiencing that work, which isn't to say that they can't experience it or shouldn't experience it, but that's definitely going to be a big part of their interpretive outlook on that thing. And I think it's complicated, but I don't think that like Woody Allen isn't Woody Allen's abuse necessarily. There's a lot more to him, but there is a context to a lot of his work, and a context that I think comes out in his work particularly that bears consideration when you're engaging with it, particularly if you're somebody who has closer contact to that kind of experience.
Yeah, and I think the reason why these questions are worthy to ask is because we're in a specific time right now in history, us and all of our contemporaries, who are having these questions sometimes for the first time, which is like, why is abuse so embedded in the creation of art throughout history? But for me, the tension of the question is it better to essentially erase those pieces of art, or to continue discussing them in a new context? And I think there's arguments for both, honestly. Like some artists have claimed that in order to move on, we must erase the past, like kind of like, I don't know, like Alfred Jarry said that. Like we must destroy.
So did so did Star Wars. They
well, so like here's
and
one
the
thing
and the Italian futurists.
Here's one thing I would say. Like, do you have to erase it?
So
no, but like, are those the people that have to be considered like if you're teaching like a public high school literature course, could you just read something else instead? That's
right.
Like there's not like, just because the thing that's always been taught in high school doesn't mean you have to keep teaching it in high school until the end of fucking history.
Or do you teach it, but in a different context?
I'm just saying, like,
right.
I don't know. Is it necessary to teach it? Like, I
right.
Don't,
that's where that's where the tension of this issue for me is.
Is that the same as erasing it? Like, is just like teaching something else instead the same as erasing it?
Surely there has to be a connection between the like inundation of options, consumer options that we have in our lifestyle, and the ability to like to do this thing of if something's suspect, and I'm not saying like to take suspect things and then just replace them with something else. Like, there has to be a connection between the way that we're treating creators and this way that like we can always get more, we can always get a new one, we have more than we can deal with, and then our relationship to objects like that.
Well, I think
we get things, we throw them away, you get a new thing. Like, of course it makes a lot of sense we would treat people like that after, because the rest of our lives are like organized around relationship with objects like that.
Well, I think that's a feature of like authoritarian materialist leftism, which I could be, I mean, I often lean materialist leftist, but like ultimately that's not where I don't know. I think there's a strong streak of leftism in this group, but I think we tend to skew more towards libertarian leftism or anarchism than we do towards these sort of authoritarian superstructures, and those are usually the ones that seek to undermine or replace artwork that's deemed like degenerate or incorrect, as opposed to a more whatever libertarian or perhaps Gnostic viewpoint that we're going to be understanding these artworks in new ways and engaging with them in ways that, you know, like maybe leave a lot of room for misunderstanding or something, but ultimately being able to engage with something difficult and wrong is better than just never seeing it before anyway.
Ultimately, I think that's where my opinion lands, is that I think erasure, the supposed attempt to erase something actually perhaps validates it unintentionally. And so that's why I tend to go for the recontextualizing route.
You can't.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, if in specifically giving like a public high school as an example, which is like you're teaching it to everyone, regardless of their level of interest or like level of engagement, and like, why not teach something that doesn't have as much a potential like emotional actually kind of like triggering or whatever response for people, which doesn't mean like if someone's gonna take like literature, American literature 2 or something, then maybe you get, you know, like
Well, let's not.
I don't
fool
know.
ourselves
I feel
into
like
thinking that if we don't teach a book in a high school, we've erased it.
that's
like-
what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
exactly that's my exact point. Like, I think that like remove like I think you can remove something from like the most extreme level of ubiquity without that being erasure. I think like you don't have to like cram something down every young person's fucking throat until the end of time, because it's the thing that's been crammed down young people's throats since the beginning of time. But that doesn't equate to erasure. Like, you could get all the same lessons about how literature works from something that wasn't written by a person who's potentially, you're like re-traumatizing people by making them engage with that person. But then if someone wants to go further into that field or whatever, you're inevitably going to have to grapple with the history of the field, and then you're going to have to grapple with these people, and like then you're talking about like teaching that work with all of that context or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know, like, I think there's like ways in which all of these ideas can be used, and all of these ways of thinking about things can be used, and it doesn't have to be one or the other in either extreme. We don't have to like keep the English Lit 1, high school English Lit 1 the same until the end of time, and you don't have to like burn all the fucking copies of Leaves of Grass or whatever either. Like, you know, like I feel
totally.
like,
And
I
think I have a buddy who actually, I went to high school with him, and he now teaches English at our high school, and film class. Like, he's a film critic, and he does not show, like, he talks about Birth of a Nation because it's a really important aspect of the development of film as a medium. But, you know, he doesn't show it. He's like, I'm not going to start, like, if you really want to go and watch this, you can find it. Like, it's out there. We're going to talk about why it was important, and I'm going to talk about why I'm not showing it, and you can make those decisions for yourself. And I think that's probably the best way to address things like that, is say, like, look, here's the deal. This thing was important. Here's why it was important. But you don't have to engage with it unless you're ready to do that.
I have something to say about why English 101 can't change, though. And it's, if we look at school as, and I think that some people, I'm not trying to be snarky here even, I think that some people feel that this is what school is for, and this is what the benefit of school is if you are trying to create a common cultural touchstone that we all can say, like, yes, we participate in this culture, and we can all make a reference to Huckleberry Finn and know what we're all talking about. in that way, it's important to keep teaching it in English 101, just so that everybody can have the same cultural references. Because if we don't have that, then the culture has grown into something different, and that's when you get like the generation gap. Now, of course,
but those cultural references are always going to shift over time.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that that's what school should be, but I think that there are people who want that they feel like
that is what school is.
Don't you think even those people could be satisfied though too? Because you wouldn't have to change every single fucking thing. You know, you just
no. Those people think that you can't change any single fucking thing.
Well,
like any change is a problem because we all like.
Well, but we didn't all
if you don't look at school as a rite of passage. If you don't, what?
I don't think every high school teaches the exact same books.
Right, but when you bring the new math home to your mom, she's like, I don't even know what the hell they're teaching you in those schools anymore. You know, like, because the point isn't figuring out how math works. The point is like, this isn't the math that I learned, and it becomes a problem for them. There are people who any kind of change in curriculum ruins the whole point of having a curriculum for them.
Yeah, people.
Well, I am personally not concerned with pleasing those people.
I don't think there should be any curricula.
I think those are maybe the same people who would insist that there's absolute and concrete interpretation of the works of Gene Wolfe.
Exactly.
that can be agreed on objectively.
But I do understand their fear.
Yeah.
You know, a way that we might horribly and uncomfortably link this to the chapter we're talking about is the villainy of Musk. Is Musk's kind of like looming creep? Is Silk uncomfortable around Musk because Silk understands subconsciously that Musk has sex with men?
I think he thinks Musk is hot. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be the other thing. Is he attracted to Musk and totally confused and upset?
I think when Musk first appears in the mirror in Ock's place, it does feel like Silk has this both like attraction to and repulsion from Musk, because it's like focused on his mouth and this like it's a very sensuous description. And
it reminds me a lot of Mr. Hyde in the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's the same sort of like, this man is creepy in a way that is hard to pin down, but it has something to do with how pretty he is.
It's like it's the id. It's like this raging id thing, and like being confronted with that, it's like it's both like ooh and also like ugh.
So is Wolfe doing something problematic here by making this most prominent gay character besides blood in the story into this symbol of murderous evil?
Maybe.
As an actor, I say, don't take this away from me. You know, let me play this evil motherfucker. Don't purify the villain, because that's the best fucking role.
I mean, there's definitely a long history of gay villains in literature and movies, especially.
Is Iago gay?
I don't know.
The parrot?
Yeah.
Is he a parrot? I don't know. I know you don't mean the parrot.
You mean like from Shakespeare?
Yes, Shakespeare's Iago.
I
Disney.
think Shakespeare did the whole having it both ways things with Iago. You're allowed to interpret Iago's motivations in multiple different ways, and that's definitely one of them, though.
I'm gonna Google it.
Well, I think that like, I mean, homosexuality has been villainized a lot more in the 20th century than it had been previously. So I don't know. I mean, it could be that Shakespeare was digging into that, but also it probably was not as much a fixture of gay characterization in literature at that point. Also, Shakespeare didn't think that he was making literature at that point.
He was just making entertainments.
Yeah, I mean for the
He was
punter.
making money.
He was making serious money.
Hand over fist for the king.
That's right.
So
All the actors in Shakespeare plays were dudes. So, it's, which I think he was aware of and playing with. Because there's so much
theater
cross-dressing.
dudes at that.
Everyone's a guy, and they're all in love with each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Theater is often thought of as a gay pursuit. Sorry, Jordan?
that's probably like the theater is probably like kind of the only place that gay people could work, right? Were they allowed
In the
to?
20th century, yeah.
I mean,
like he probably wouldn't be like gay people are evil. He probably knew what that was. Right?
He'd be
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I have a
Shake-
gay friend who would be perfect for the bad guy in this new story. Oh my god, he is gonna kill it. As the slightly
Shakespeare
gay
supposedly was
villain.
gay. There are a lot of critics who think that.
I think the gay villain has really like appeared more as a product of like evangelical moralizing, like since the probably the 1930s. Like
Probably a cinematic thing more than a literary thing.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too, and part of that might have just been gay actors playing villain characters and that kind of like seeping in. But I don't know.
When I was reading this time and like thinking about, like what does it mean now to read this now and see this, this most evil guy in the book is prominently the gayest guy in the book. My brain started to go to this place of like, okay, Wolfe is like, he's a very intelligent person. Is the gay thing a symbol? Is it like, this is not supposed to be a commentary on literal gayness, but supposed to be a commentary on like, is he using this to try to invoke the feeling of knowing that someone is different in a way that is way under the surface and that, like a difference of perspective? Can this be a symbol for that?
Well, I mean, I think it could be partly too because Silk is battling with his sexuality in a big. I mean, like he has, especially once Chenille comes in, and is just constantly trying to bone him. But like in the last chapter, in chapter 6, like with Hyacinth, Silk is at war with his own sexuality in a lot of ways, and then Musk is someone who is other, but is also pretty comfortable with who he is.
That's a good point.
And so, sorry.
Mucor tells Silk that Musk doesn't actually like blood. So is Musk gay, or is Musk just like a power climber?
No, he's like the boyfriend's at Tiger King.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. That
Musk,
dude is like,
Musk isn't attracted to men. Musk is attracted to cruelty.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe his evilness is more important than him being gay.
Well, and he needs a sugar daddy. He needs a sugar daddy to get his bird thing work going.
Exactly.
Well, and also I'm sure that Musk loves taking this well-to-do man who is maybe a little bit more cute and coy about his sexuality and opening him up and really making him feel empowered to explore his homosexuality when really Musk isn't even gay and is just making fun of him and is going to hurt him horribly in the end. And
Like cruel intentions.
yeah, exactly. That's what Musk likes.
Cruel intentions.
Yeah.
So either way, he's very comfortable with that with that presentation of his sexuality. It's like
he's not battling it; he's using it. He's putting it to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is Gene Wolfe problematic here? Maybe, but I think with most questions about that we've come up with, it's complicated.
Not problematic enough for me to sweat.
Yeah, I'm not sweating it.
Just problematic enough for me to feel obliged to mention that I didn't not think about it.
Right. So you get 3 woke points. for.
I need them. I need all the ones I can get.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Can we have a little animation?
Oh, that would be tight. A woke-a-meter?
Oh man, that'll make the libertarian Catholics so mad, or they'll love it.
Yeah, I can't tell. I feel like it's a joke at it, so they might really like it.
Yeah, we can have it both ways.
Do you guys watch the Useful Idiots podcast?
Yes.
No, what's
Yeah,
that?
it's great. And
We got a
so
woke
every time they have a woke moment, it's sort of it's a podcast that kind of satirizes neoliberalism and politics from both directions. But anyway, every time they have like a woke moment, they like play like "Wake Me Up Before You Go." And, like,
What's it called?
Useful Idiots with Matt Taibbi and what is the Katie Halpert. Yeah, it's a good background podcast to have on.
I like watching it.
Yeah, it's good.
Is Taibbi charismatic? I've only ever read him. I've never seen him talk, I don't think.
He's not super
like
charismatic. He's good though.
I don't think he has enough I have never listened to that podcast, but I've heard interviews with him, and I would say that he has enough personality to like carry a conversation. He's not like boring.
Yeah, he's not boring.
But he's not like flashy.
He's no Mark and Connor of Nodding Off with Mark and Connor.
That's right.
Go crying to the froggies.
So we've covered one page of this book so far.
Well, this is a really straightforward chapter though.
Yeah.
Like we get the business here. I feel like
we do get that really awesome little chestnut about Paz having two heads, like it's no big deal. That's really cool in this chapter.
Yeah.
Describing the painting where one of the heads is condemning the lost spirits, the other head livid. Oh, one head livid with rage while the other pronounced their doom. Who are the lost spirits?
What page is that? Or where is that?
I'm reading on my Kindle, so I can't tell you any kind of
roughly where it
information.
What chapter is it in?
The one we're talking about, bargain, chapter 7.
Yeah.
beginning, middle, and
I would say middle. I've gone quite a bit past our blue eyes thing, looking for my underlines. It's after go crying to the froggies.
yeah.
Oh, go crying to the froggies. That's what it was.
It's after that. It's not that far after that. Maybe a page, perhaps. Oh wait, no. Maybe a little more than that. I'm looking at a different underline.
What are we looking for?
Who can say? Oh, just this one little line about the painting of Paz in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got two heads. This is the first time we hear about Paz having two heads, right? He didn't
That
tell
might
us
be
that before.
true.
Which was, the first time I read it was cool as shit, because that was the first time I even possibly considered that it might be Typhon.
Right.
And, of course, knowing Wolfe, it's definitely Typhon. He's not another two-headed fucking king. They're all the two-headed king.
Oh, it's when he's talking to.
Just want to read it in context. Where the fuck is it?
Can
It's
I
like
point out
literally
what
not-
or is it
You're
too
a brave
soon?
man, Patera, as well as a resourceful one. It's right after Musk stroked Silk's hair. It made him feel unclean, and he said, "Stop that." Musk did. You're a brave man, Patera, as well as a resourceful one. Blood strode across the room to study a gray and gold painting of Paz, condemning the lost spirits. One head livid with rage while the other pronounced their doom. I really don't think there's anything to say about it other than this, it's cool because he has two heads in the painting, and now I suddenly am thinking Typhon and Paz have a relationship.
Yeah.
Here at the top of page 143, he's in like the second paragraph. He says, most of them aren't anywhere near as close to the IU you know who I mean, as I am, but something to keep in mind whether you think so or not. Which is really funny, because later that really, that's revealed later that he is working with the IU and it's a really big deal. he's like literally saying like, it might not seem like that makes any difference or you care, but you should think about it.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny.
Whoa, what else do people want to talk about in here? There's lots of little examples of Silk being innately good, or at least not, if not good, selfless. Like all the struggling he has. I guess it's not struggling. Every time he lies, he acknowledges that he's lying and also like assesses the degree to which he's lying, which I think is a really like important thing about Silk, is that he takes every single lie that he's willing to lie, but he takes them all seriously and wants to be honest with himself about how much he's lying when he lies.
And he tries to figure out ways around lying.
Yeah, which is like fundamentally different from Severian in a huge way. Severian lies to himself all the time, lies to us, lies to anybody without seeming to like really put himself out about it. Whereas Silk wants to know when he's lying and how much at all times. Yeah?
Yeah.
You
Am I
think
boring
that
you,
like,
Connor?
good people will tally up all of their rights and wrongs and like in a like you think good people are tracking everything they do?
Well, I think in a way maybe is this like it's like a lot of people have a criticism or a reaction to religion of that it's like not right to be hounded by guilt, that guilt is like a purely bad influence on people's life, and that maybe part of what Wolfe does with Silk is to show us that Silk is made good by his guilt. I don't know if that's like
is
something
that
happening
guilt
here.
or is it him? Because he wants to see a god so bad he won't even like bang the girl he likes just so he can see a god. Like, is it that like he has in mind that he wants to like please them, right? And so he's making sure that in the end he's going to, at the end of the day, he's going to level out, like it's going to balance out to him doing more good than bad for his own personal gain.
Is that less real than doing the same actions for like a more honorable reason?
I don't know, because I don't understand why you're like so obsessed with proving Silk's goodness.
Because I think that's part of Wolfe's agenda. I think Wolfe is like, in the way that he was showing us all these really horrible sides of Severian and like how they affected the world and the people around him, I kind of feel like that's sort of the agenda with Silk, is that he's not entirely good, but there are certain aspects of him and certain like mechanisms going on here that make him a positive force for himself and for other people, and that they are kind of classic and almost cheesy virtuous things, but I feel like Wolfe is doing these cute little defenses of them. I don't know, that's just a sense I get from Silk.
So, but the point of New Sun is that Severian, this terrible person who's lying to himself and others all the time, is in the end the savior of the world, because it's like, right, when we're talking about how it's like, it's those bad things that make it so he is somebody that everyone can aspire to be, because we all have those same things. So like, that's what's great about the Autarch, because it's not this like pure individual. So what would he then be saying about Silk if it's the exact, if he's being the opposite?
Oh, maybe it comes back to Horn, in that when we are Severian, we have to see ourselves as being horrible. But when we're Horn looking at Silk, we are benefited perhaps by romanticizing.
Because it's not really Silk, it's Horn Silk.
Yeah, it's the creation. It's a messiah that is set up for us all to believe in and emulate, and I guess to be an illustration of how someone might live honorably.
Well, that's how, like, because Jesus was probably kind of whatever, dude, just a dude. And but we have the book about him, about how he's like the coolest dude.
Yeah, written by his apostles and
Yeah.
other divinely inspired writers. But yeah, the idea is that his friends, his boys who hung out with him and like were, you know, so inspired by him and loyal to him are the ones that tell us all about his life.
Mm-hmm. If Jesus wrote the Bible, it'd probably be a little different.
We have a gospel according to Jesus.
Damn! Is it like... And then, I definitely did not molest that little kid.
I mean, it was
Absolutely
kind of,
never would have done that.
it is the one that's kind of like, and then I ran away to Egypt, and all those people thought I died on the cross. What a bunch of idiots! Ha ha ha!
Sanic says, I think it's important to keep in mind that Silk is supposed to be Typhon's son/clone, and Typhon was the most evil character in New Sun. And that, so this is like, I guess, you know, in a way, this is good coming out of evil. This is like the unintentional.
Maybe it's like an evil dude's idea of what a good dude would be, and that's why he's kind of annoying. So I like to know, oh, whatever should I do? Should I use the rope? What sticks? Like, you know.
That's why he ends up not even being the true hero of.
Like, he doesn't even fuck or anything. Oh wait, he does later. Like he's so like, yeah.
That's just Wolfe putting on these different lenses, you know, and we're looking through several different lenses here. So it's hard to say what it precisely means. But I mean, is Severian correct that Typhon is evil? Is he? Was Typhon evil?
Maybe it's like a Magneto thing. Really right.
He's definitely shitty.
I don't like him.
It is pretty damning that his second head says "kill me" and help Severian kill the first head. That is pretty damning.
True.
Yeah, but just
to tell you another thing, I
agree.
Like Boss.
What? Just to make the argument, though, I mean, we don't know all that happened that way.
Oh yeah, some Severian just rolled in there and
Well,
was like, "Fuck you, old
But
man."
also, Typhon stole his fucking. He was a slave, and Typhon stole his fucking body.
I think Typhon is definitely shitty. I don't know that good and evil really exist in this Wolfe universe.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't think you have to have. I don't think Piaton has to like necessarily be judging Typhon by anything other than what he's done to him.
Good point.
That's all I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
All he knows is the constant torture of being attached to Typhon's body. Or no, the other thing, that Typhon is on his body. Oh.
he stole his body.
Yeah, stole his whole body. All he can do is make eye contact. Meaningful eye contact.
Oh,
Yeah. Jerk off.
Oh,
There's a line in here that made me think a lot about election. There are richer men than I am, and crookeder men than I am. Lots of them. And Patera, most of them aren't anywhere near as close to the I am. I guess this is the one we just talked about. That's something to keep in mind, whether you think so or not. I guess the reason that I underlined this one was because I felt like this is our like political situation of like.
That's a Donald Trump thing to say, for sure.
Oh, it's also a kind of a Biden thing to say, you know. There's a guy that's crookeder than me. I'm the one you want to be my friend.
That's really true.
And I feel like in Baltimore City, we have this issue with our local politicians. People that are like, yeah, come on, I'm not as crooked as that one. Did you see her books? Did you see her child's books? I'm nothing. I'm not doing anything as weird as that. Nothing to see here. Yeah. Keep moving.
I get to do this crime. It's not as bad as that crime.
That's like, I feel like being a politician at all is sort of like saying that. Mm-hmm. Sort of saying, I mean, is being a politician at this point that much different than joining the police force as far as like delusional ideas about who you're helping? It's close. It's got to be close. It's getting there.
I would like for that to not be true. I recognize that historically it is often true.
I mean, how many examples do we need of like politicians who are using their position in ways we don't want them to use them in until we start grouping them, thinking of them the same way we think of as cops?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the most part, most people do think of them that way. I think that anyone who isn't that way is an exception to the rule.
Yeah, but it does seem like people
I think in the most part that is true. I think for the most part that is true.
Yeah, is it that want or that hope, I guess, that Tim's describing? I feel like is the difference. Is that like it would be so much less scary if politics had the ability to correct itself and fix itself. So I'm not going to give up on that idea. There's no good politicians in this book, huh?
I don't think there are good politicians anywhere.
Yeah. But especially not in this book. None of the I guess we're a ways away from all those monkey people.
In their secret underwater lair.
Uh-huh.
The monkey people.
So I was just thinking when I was in the bathroom that if Hyacinth is Jolenta, is Chenille Dorcas?
What do you think?
I think yes.
She's so much bigger than Dorcas.
Way bigger than Dorcas. But her size is brought up a lot, just like how Dorcas' size is.
Is that what points to it then?
No, I was thinking just like their relationship and like who else would it be, really? Maybe
Well,
men.
the only other main female character you have in New Sun is Agia.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she has to be Rose because Rose is the only other bad guy lady in this story. I think that there's a lot of non-formulaic characters.
Yeah, I don't think
I don't necessarily think that they all overlay, but I think that there is a lot of overlay.
What about Baldanders? Is there a Baldanders?
Oh, that would have to
I
be.
mean, I just don't know that this. I don't know that this line of thinking is necessarily useful, but it's like more useful when it comes up naturally.
Right.
Yeah.
These flashes of
I feel
Connor
like
with his
trying
Bowie
to
knife.
force categories onto characters is
I don't
not.
think I'm forcing it, but like because they don't serve the exact same function in the stories and they're not exactly the same. It's interesting to think about how no, it's not a perfect overlay, it's not a one-to-one. But it's like it's more like on an archetypal level about so it's like flattening out the characters, which maybe is like not interesting or cool to do. But it's like thinking about how okay, like those two characters are so different. Like it was easier and like more interesting in that moment to think of Hyacinth as Jolenta because it's like way more apparent. But like I feel like when you try to like pick apart how different like people can relate and how they can like serve the same function or a similar function in the story, then you're like thinking about the characters in a more like symbolic level.
Well, then Blood is Baldanders.
Huh?
I said then Blood is Baldanders.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. They both have B.
Castles. They both have castles. And they both have a Dr. Crane Talos guy.
They both have maybe a boy in their bedroom.
Well, they both are like building something up with a long game in mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're both bad guys on like fundamentally in the plot, but have admirable characteristics that other characters are, appreciate despite their bad actions.
Sympathetic bad guys.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Connor's
Who aren't
idea.
really bad guys. They turn out to not necessarily even. We're just expecting them and assuming that they're bad guys. And then in the end, Ledger's just like, I don't know, I was just like fucking around. This thing happened, so I was like, fine. Whatever. That is very similar to Ballbanders.
Hmm.
John O'Neill has said, Connor's idea that some groups nurture and some groups consume their members applies to politicians and police, etc. Oh,
Yeah.
And Joseph says, good people constantly flagellate themselves over eating the last of the tomatoes.
Oh, Tomato Gate. That's in chapter 8.
Tomato Gate.
That's in the next chapter, right?
Oh, makes me want fried green tomatoes.
I did have fried tomatoes this morning.
You saying you're trying to murder your husband?
What?
No.
Oh,
No one's
is that
ever
the-
seen fried green tomatoes?
No,
All
I've
right.
never seen it.
That's what they do in it. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Oh. So it's like throw mama from the
People
train.
should do.
Yeah, a group of women conspire to murder their husbands. I think. But it's
They poison
wholesome.
the tomatoes?
They do poison them. I forget if they did it with the tomatoes.
Okay, you guys, here's what I would like to suggest. Does anyone, I would like to suggest, we only have a few minutes left, and I would like to suggest that we look to see if there's any other things we want to talk about in chapter 7 at the end here with, like, I don't know, musk and his birds or whatever, and then I would suggest that we start an Orb or whatever in the next meeting.
An Orb? What?
I assume Orb's in this fucking next chapter.
Oh.
Yeah. We
The
have
border
there's
on
been
the
like a
larvae.
whole parade of new characters. We had like the first appearance of Mucor, then the first appearance of Hyacinth, the first appearance of Crane, and then we're about to get it's like the clown cars opening up at this part of the story.
The end of this chapter is the first time we get out of Silk's head,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and into another character's head. That's Musk. We get
Yeah.
to see the world Musk-sized. Ha-ha. How does he say ha-ha in your head? Does he say ha-ha?
Ha ha
Ha ha.
Oh, I think he's,
Ha ha.
I think he's saying ha ha.
Yeah.
Like a hawk.
Ha
Ha.
ha.
Sort of like when you make a good point, like refuting something Connor said, you go, ha, Connor.
Is that what people say? I don't think I've heard
Ha,
that.
Connor. I did
I
it.
say it
I
all-
defeated your reasoning with my...
That's what.
reasoning."
Yeah, I've never
That's
heard
what
someone
Ryan
do that
said.
before.
So that's what Ryan's saying in his internal monologue.
Oh, I see. I
And
guess
when I
sometimes
look down
people
and I
do it
see
to
all
themselves
of the
and they
rows,
just don't notice.
the one...
The end of this chapter has that thing that we were making fun of a couple weeks ago, where he's thinking about like the majesty of space, and then he's like, "Oh, this ball, I'll squeeze it, make my hand will get stronger." That's all. Nothing more to say about it. It's just funny. Remember when we were talking about it? It was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a thing I underlined, but I don't know that... I feel like it's something we talk about a lot. It's a general thing, but it's like I don't know, it's a conflict in my own life, so I underline all these parts of this book. They had been below the ball. He's talking about how he still has those 2 cards he got from Blood, like when he robbed, when he intimidated him in the street or whatever. And and he's saying they had been below the ball when he had been searched, and the ball had saved them. For what? This is like part of what I guess what Silk, I feel like the Silk represents for me, is like doing this. There's a big part of, I guess, like the super ego of my own self is that thinking like this is wrong. That thinking like this is superstitious and self-centered, and you shouldn't think like this is how simple people think. But then there's another part of me that says, but maybe it's good if it has results. Like maybe if you have faith and it makes you more effective and happier person, that it's stupid not to have faith and not to think like this. This is something that Silk provokes in me a lot. Like, Silk is portrayed as kind of an idiot for being obsessed with interpreting things as all having meaning that is relevant to him and to his situation.
I don't think that like trying to find another level of meaning is stupid. I don't think it's stupid at all. I think like his preoccupation with it is kind of just a waste of time. Not so much stupid, but just sort of like, but you know what? He's a thinky guy. What is he gonna do? That's the way.
Mr. Thinky Pants.
Yeah. Sanic says, it's really weird that Horn just made up that scene at the end of Musk playing with his bird. It's strange when you think about Horn. I guess we have to keep watching when this might happen again, huh?
How did this information get to Horn?
Well, is Horn being an author here and knowing that in the future he's got to set up the stuff with Musk and the birds and the flyers? And so it makes more sense to put a little bit of seed that with Musk by himself before you do the important thing with Musk and by himself?
To me, that's the weirdest aspect of the whole fact that Horn is writing this book, is that Horn is also a remarkable crafter of stories, like with like a very fine point to it. You know, like if we understand that Horn wrote this, like it's totally a big narrative construction, you know?
Nettle had a big hand in it.
Oh yeah, Nettle too. Hey, I just want everyone to know that there's a cat on my lap a lot when I'm down here.
Josie.
And sometimes I look up, you know, when she's down here and she's like purring and stuff. And sometimes I look at my little square in the corner and I can see my arm moving and you can't see the cat. And I just want everyone to know that if I'm ever like, you know, like this or whatever, it's because the cat's there.
Thank you. Thank you for the context, Ryan.
Oh, we should probably pin that explanation to the front page of the YouTube channel.
I think that holds for all of us except for Tim and Connor. So
yeah, I don't got a cat.
So if you're moving your hand that way, we know what it is. It's the dreaded thing that I am vehemently denying that I would do on this show.
Yeah, I don't really feel hung up about it. So sure.
So you might. You're saying you might?
Yeah. I am saying that. I'm saying beware.
But one thing people might, I'm obsessively shuffling a stack of magic cards in my hand throughout almost every episode we've done. And I always do.
Knitting needles earlier. Gotta be
I have some thinking putty that I play with a lot too.
Oh, cool. Fine.
Wow. Well, we've broken the fourth wall.
I play with this knife sometimes.
Oh, I also play with this knife a lot too. Yeah.
John O'Neill says this show makes people want to pet their cat.
Oh dear.
I feel like we're getting closer to the dirty thing instead of further away from it.
So, this feels like a good time to stop talking.
We're good now, right?
Yeah.
This chapter,
everybody.
we did this chapter.
When is our next meeting?
2 weeks.
October 11th.
Fuck.
Okay.
That doesn't work?
Can we do okay, I'm gonna be gone for 2 Sundays. Actually, I might be back for the one after that. But I'm going out of town.
Use
probably starting on the 10th.
Do you want to do Saturday? Is that where you're going here?
No, I'm probably leaving that day. I was gonna say maybe we could do a 1 weeker.
And then the next one on the 25th after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm cool with that.
So what's the date of the next one?
The 4th, next week?
4th, yeah.
4th.
October.
Are you guys cool with that?
Yeah.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Not doing anything else.
Yeah, we're
Where's
going.
everyone?
We're going. What?
Oh, I was just kind of curious about where everyone is with their work schedule. Like, if people, how many people are back to their full work schedule? How many people are not?
Not really.
I've been on full work schedule. It never changed.
You never got anything off, yeah.
I've been working remotely, but I have like a regular office job, so I can finish it in 2 to 3 hours a day. So it's been like a lot of time off. The whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of downtime for sure, but
I have a hectic, crazy schedule.
Are we still streaming?
Yeah. I can stop.
Oh,
join us next week for another Wolf Pack, and like and subscribe.
And
Goodbye.
on Tuesday, check out Nodding Off on Tuesdays.
Yep, new episode each Tuesday, at least for the next month.
Wolfpack is also Cat Pack.
Cat Pack. Meow. Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Wait,
Are
I'm
we-
not done talking with people though.
No, it's in the stream. The stream is over, but we're still talking.
Okay. Wait. Oh